for us today. In that event, Todd, do we need to do full roll call votes since all members will be physically present?
So, Madam Chair, I think typically we would have Meredith call the roll of individual members, but then whenever you're voting on motions, just a voice vote from everyone would be fine.
Excellent, thank you. So at this time then, Meredith, I think today. Oh, everyone, please. In that event, Todd, do we need to do full votes since all members will be. We'll try to minimize any disruptions in our sound feed today as we will, of course, be live streaming the meeting. And at this time, Meredith, we're ready for roll call.
Voice vote.
Joanne, out.
Excellent, thank you.
Claire, back.
So at this time then, Meredith, I think
All
today.
legal left. Here.
In that event, Todd, do we
Here.
need to do
Alvin Johnson.
Here.
since all members will be. We'll try to minimize any disruptions in our sound feed today as we
Here.
will, of course, be live
Randy
streaming
Tuttle.
the meeting.
Here, but then whenever.
And at this
Karen
time, Meredith,
Robinson.
we're gonna roll call here.
Joanne, out.
Excellent,
Todd,
thank you.
Claire, back.
So at
Luke
this
Young.
here.
All legal left. Here. Kenneth Coleman. Here. Alvin Johnson. Amanda Ellis, first VP President Aaron Thompson. Here. Soliana Nesbitt. Here. Allison Bloom. Here. Chair, you have the quorum.
Excellent, thank you. And getting us into the spirit of retreat today, I am going to work through an activity with your hopefully cheerful, willing engagement. I'm calling it Mission and Purpose Meet VBS. I'm hoping you have fond memories of craft time in Bible school. So, in all seriousness, the protocol that I'm using is one that, from the National School Reform Initiative. So I want to give all credit to that team. I don't know if those of you educators in the room or organizational developers have used the school reform protocols before, but I love them. I find them to be rich and interactive and really appropriate for the work that we're going to be doing in a lot of different ways. So if you're a professional developer and you haven't used them, just Google National School Reform Initiative and you'll find these great protocols. This one was adapted by a fellow named John Pieper in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And so it's entitled Barriers and Bridges. So we're going to actually make some bricks today, paper ones, not clay and straw, but we're going to make some bricks today. And here's the premise that I want you to think about as we engage in this activity with each other. So I do want everybody to participate. Please, Commissioner, Amanda, everybody, if you'll jump in on this, I'd really appreciate the engagement. So in our line of work, it's often easy for us to get focused in on the obstacles and the barriers. A lot of times we're tempted to admire the problem and spend a lot of time admiring the problem. It's important. Root causes are important. Understanding the complexity of the work that we do is incredibly important. But I also want to contend that our main role at this table is about building bridges, not building walls. That we will be wisely aware of the barriers and the challenges that we face, the wall, if you will, but at the same time that we will be solution-oriented and optimistic as we think about ways that we can poke a window through that wall, open a door through that wall, or in fact build a bridge. So that's what we're going to be thinking about today. And I'm going to have you use your notes first. So if you guys are Kaganized, you know about think, pair, and square. So we're going to do it in that kind of an order. Good morning. And so, Lieutenant Governor, what do you think about that? So happy you're here. Thank you for being here. So in the activity, I want you to, we're going to think first, then you're going to turn to a shoulder partner. If we end up with the need for a triad on the end, if you guys will pick that up, let's see, I haven't even stopped to count. And then your first chore will be to think on your own. I'm going to set the timer on my phone and give you a couple minutes to do that. So you're going to turn to a shoulder partner and share out with each other so that you can hear your partner's thinking on that. And then you're going to make a square. So you're going to be in a square of 4, maybe we'll need a 5, I'm not sure. And then at that point, you guys will have kind of responded with 2 lists of things. I'll describe your prompt in a second. And then after that, we're going to make some Vacation Bible School. So your chore will be to think about what barriers might our students across Kentucky face today. This isn't about blame. This isn't about anger. This isn't about negativity. This is about what barriers might we realistically identify. And so I've made my first brick, and it is exclusionary discipline practices. So we know by looking at the data that a lot of times students of color, students with disabilities, are more often excluded from school through suspension and expulsion than others. I think that's a barrier for some kids. On the other side of my brick, I think that one solution to that at the practice level and even at the policy level is the notion of restorative discipline practices. How can we build the capacity in our kids, in our educators, and build school cultures in such a way that exclusion is always ultimately the very, very last resort. So I have a wall statement on one side of my Bible school brick. On the other, I have a positive practice, a bridge kind of practice. So we're going to see if we can't come up with about 50 of those. That number is really magical because that's how many sets of bags I have. But in this room, so many great minds, so many conversations. I think we can come up with 50 different barriers and bridges that we can admire briefly today. The real challenge is going to come. I was hoping Lee was going to be here because we could use an engineer. We're going to try to build a wall on the table. I have bad Jenga memories come to mind, a little PTSD here, but we're going to see if we can build a wall. On the one side of the wall, we'll put all of our barrier words, and then we'll go around and have a different perspective and look at all of our bridge words. All right, clear as mud? Good. Okay, good. It sounds all right, good. Thank you. You're very kind. All I could think of last night as I went to bed was this is either going to be enlightening or super dope. So it's up to you to determine how that's going to go. All right, so in the first few minutes, if you will, just make a T-chart on your notepad. There's some pins up here. I'm happy to send those around. Yes, of course, Soliana doesn't have one. When was the last time you used a writing utensil? So what I want you to do on the left-hand side is start thinking about those barriers. And we'll have some repeats. So when you get to your partners, you guys are going to come up with, don't exclude from the list because we want to try to get to 50. Even if we have some repeats, that's okay. But let's come up with as many as we possibly can. And then as many bridges, the solution ideas on the right. They don't have to be comprehensive solutions. These are complex, intractable problems, but there are some things that we can do to address those barriers. I'm going to put 2 minutes on my phone. Any questions before you get started? Go. Just to prime a little bit, if you haven't thought about them, what barriers might some of our most gifted and talented students encounter in our schools and classrooms today. What about our English learners? What about our most significantly cognitively disabled kiddos? All right, you don't have to stop, you just have to start working with a partner. So this is the pair part, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So actually, I think we do end up with pairs. If you'll take Randy and you'll take Jason, you two, oh no, I think I might, wait, math was not my strong suit, I can count. 8, 10, 12, yeah, we do need a triad. So if you guys will take the triad, Mr. Johnson, and then Patrice and Randy, Joanne and Sharon, and then I think it'll work out great to the end. All right, so your task now,
Joanne.
yes, your task now is not to eliminate any. It's just to share with one another your lists and what you were thinking about. So listen to each other about what you were thinking about.
Do we need to have a collective?
You are not trying to win anything. You're not. You're just sharing out right now. And then when there's a square, we'll start putting them together. All right, I'd like to spend more time on this. I'll listen to the noise level, but no more than 5 minutes tops, but I'll listen to you guys talk. Was there belonging there too? Did I hear you?
Yeah. Yeah, and then solutions that, involve students, whether that be in teams or, everyday stuff.
I think it all gets collected by the because you can't do the other things unless you have the resources to do it. So I said, grid, increase tax revenues. So that we can provide the funding for the education, aspirations. Then I see the second area, correct,
3 times 13.
staff. Obviously, one of our main priorities throughout this year was to increase the emergency, et cetera. So I said, Red, we need a higher staff. But it's easier said than done. Because it really goes back here, a lack of funding, because let's just face it, if I have an opportunity to work with calling on it, that's right. 30,000, then I can go work
And then you're 100% right. Campus market, they can have it. We have the same thing even as somebody who's even in engineering field. Our science teacher. Well, they're offering them an additional $20,000 a day. Well, the schools are looking, we got nothing, like we do, but let's good luck, right? So,
I don't even know how this works.
So,
I'm loving the conversation, but let's try to wrap it about 90 seconds, please.
Once I get started, I'll.
This is the work that I was thinking, this is one of our big pieces, so I'll just add one on there, because I was rearranging my text, but mine was access to early post-secondary, and just for students to know their worth of access beyond high school. And part of that is communication and access, I mean, criteria, they're capable. But it's also a mindset that students are capable, regardless of their, have any type of disability. Doesn't mean that they're low or dumb or that they can't do it. If you're a color, if they're low income, or are, as far as capabilities that they are. And so we have mindset change with work on that I think that, increase their
Last 30 seconds with the partner.
My works with the church and the high school.
That's a big ask.
She's working around the clock, so I definitely think increase research. I know the value.
Okay, thank you. I eavesdropped on some really good conversations. And you don't have to absolutely be finished, because now you're gonna square or make a pentagon. So we have a group of 5 over here. We have 4 at this table and 4 at this table. If you're worried about sitting all day today, this would be a great chance to come up and stand by your partners. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go from pair to square, where you're going to share with each other. Now, at this point, you're looking for what your bricks might say. And so we begin to start starring the ones that you want to make sure we get a brick. Now, somebody might already have your brick. That's okay. You'll have several others in your brainstorm bucket for this. But again, the process, the conversation is the most important part. So lean into that, really enjoy that conversation with your colleagues. We're just hoping the bricks thing works. So any questions about your charge as you're sharing now in your squares? All right, same thing, I'll be listening for the noise, no more than 5 minutes in the interest of time. But go ahead and please get started.
I can only get on
money would fly. Other side of that wall is
So on our brick, we want lack of trust on one side, communication on the other side.
Lack of trust, what do you mean?
Okay, I think that, from attending KES and NSBA, they're not feeling that, or they're feeling issues are being done to them.
Because we've always done
And I think the things.
Why is this being done?
social service.
Yeah, we had the same, that sort of disengaging.
We weren't involved in scrap. Even though we're for it, why would we get sick?
We gotta have.
Get an amen from the peanut gallery.
And then, some of them did that for the kind of.
I'd say lack of individualized resources for students, that's a barrier, and then solution professional development towards.
Don't start making your bricks yet, though, in case we have a repeat.
Okay.
And knowing their needs,
Helping those families.
later on, so that they can provide.
So, that was pretty much. I was trying to get a.
I was on.
How does hold that stuff?
building language barriers and I thought,
I couldn't tell you that now, but I, as a, catchphrase, but I do believe.
right.
Well, if somebody.
Owning that.
So there's, you can check that off. Maybe something universal.
Yeah, and it's not truly meaningfully.
And do we have early childhood?
Yes. And that's where frequency comes in.
What did you say the first?
Unstable. Unstable. Okay, I just didn't hear you. And this kind of.
They're gonna be more engaged in their students' learning in the 1 hour. It's just
Yes. For bridge, lack of opportunities for advanced schools. There are areas and pockets really it's gonna take much longer. And then there are pockets that there's non-existent.
That's what we literally.
Yeah.
So that's part of
Yeah, we'll do a second round, and then we'll get her.
Why was that math so hard?
That's when I said that all hinges on the lack of money. I said, you can't solve them.
My girl.
Solve them with, so it's a lack of money. That's one of the barriers we face in education, and have faced in Kentucky since the beginning of my career back in the '70s.
And it's not just right.
Right. Like, I was very good at last week. Okay, good. We need
No matter how wisely we use it.
About 15 more seconds.
And the bridge would be somehow to increase our tax revenue. That's dedicated to the educational system. That would be there. When I said the lack of diversity in our education staff is certainly one of the barriers. The bridge would be to hire even more diverse staff, but then we got the discussion.
All right, let's start wrapping the squares.
We put all together and I think well, those sit mine were early post-secondary opportunities and just communication with families and students on, number one, their worth and ability to pursue beyond high school. There's a lot of missed opportunity and affordability. So we kind of go through. I think you're the one that has the early post-secondary opportunity. Pathway to work-based experience that have a pretty and that goes down to see that when I have started on LPD kids. But I didn't, 2 minutes.
Yeah, let's wait and see kind of how it goes, but if you have some ideas, I want to make sure you give everybody an opportunity what British might be missing.
So kind of like your original pairs.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I'd like to do a credit for service.
A couple people mentioned communities of college. You know, if there's any,
You have a high school that has 3, and we have a high school that has 30.
I know we have a lot.
That's a big
I know
difference.
if we have different, so I will check.
okay.
Ours, almost any.
I know that. All right, so let's have a conversation. And from this conversation, we're going to identify our big bricks. So thank you so much. I loved being a fly on the wall for that. I also love that I'm having trouble getting it back in attention, so that's great. It's just like teaching my graduate school students. I love it. All right, so we've got Team A over here, Team B in the middle, Team C over here, just to help us kind of help me remember to make sure I've heard from everybody. So we've got lots of bricks to build over there, Poe. So I want to give you one tip. So you're going to only write on one of the bags. The middle bag is totally blank. It's just there to build the brick, okay? So you do need, one empty bag, one plain bag in the middle. If you need any support on this, I'm sorry. One tip, you want to write them on the same, you want to write upside down on the other side. So turn them, not flip them, but turn them laterally so that they're written in the same direction on both sides. Otherwise, we'll be reading upside down on our wall. So I want to hear from Team A over here. Randy's he's so convinced that he's going to get this one on here. He's not worried about repeats. He's already got it ready, and it's a really good one. So we're going to let Team A share their barrier and one of the possible bridges. So Randy, what did you guys talk about?
Lack of trust on one side and then clear lines of communication for the other.
Okay, nice. Say just a little bit more about that on the trust side. I think that's a great one.
You want me to say something?
Yes, please. Or Patrice, whoever was on your team on that one.
Oh, yeah, to prove that I listened.
Good.
I know that strategy. We discussed the line of communication, perhaps from KDE to our superintendents, to our teachers, to our parents, and that line, how sometimes it can be broken. You know, that there can be links that are not fully rounded. That results in a lack of trust in some cases. It's like, why didn't we know about this?
Yeah.
And so, am I sharing it with you? Okay.
Yeah.
So the other side of that is just to, the follow through on communication, and it's a frustrating thing because you can tell and you can tell and you can tell and you can tell, but there's always a case where somebody doesn't hear.
Right, and communication isn't just tell and tell and tell, right? It is two-way communication. It is that communication loop, and it makes me think about I love that one. It makes me think about so many bridges on the side of that. We can have cultural responsiveness and a willingness to engage all people, a willingness to take the school to the community, not always bring the community to the school. So many wonderful bridges can be built there. So we're going to put the bridge on this side, Randy?
Yep.
And you got the easy brick to build. I think it'll stand up.
Yeah.
And then you'll put the barrier on that side. All right, Team B, one of your all's agreed upon barriers and bridges bricks.
You want to do the testing one? Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, so we writ large, it's testing. There's a lot underneath that, accountability. And then for the restorative side of the bridge, I think we're going to use a term like test for learning.
Nice.
And kind of sum it up that way because all of us can tell the stories of how we watch, the way we test, why we test, how it has limited practice and therefore accessibility for students' access to what teachers know and could do. Holly was talking about visiting a school and the teachers kind of recognizing that students aren't writing well because when they stop doing portfolios in favor of getting ready for the test, all the writing skills just kind of dwindled and they weren't being used. So students not being able to, are required to, or inspired to, given the opportunity to show what they know, using language, using art, and working with their fellow students, we're depriving them of real skills that they should develop as a part of going to school.
Excellent. Of course, you know that really resonates with me. And I had a board attorney who used to always say, no good deed goes unpunished. And I know from a 31-year rear view mirror that the accountability was intended to be good for kids and communities. It was about our opportunity to share the good work that was happening in public schools and to hold ourselves to a standard. But it has certainly morphed over time, and I think this notion that it has become an albatross that takes us to places we don't want to go is definitely a common barrier that we're working on. So, and we can think of lots and lots of ways to build that bridge side, but I think testing for learning, so that testing, in fact, becomes part of the learning process, not separate from it, is a great bridge. All right, thanks, Team B. Team C, one of your bricks.
One of the things we talked about was the disengaging curriculum that really makes many children feel like they don't really have an interest, it doesn't apply to them. It's been what's always been done and the way it's always been done. So we see as a solution really shifting to a more individualized instruction where we address kids' interests and needs a little bit more closely to help them become active participants in their own education.
Excellent, thank you. I am, in the interest of time, going to limit commentary, but except to know that you're all getting mental standing ovations from me on that. So from a curriculum that is content-driven to one that is student-centered with some individualization and personalization for sure. Okay, so Claire, you may need to do some good brickwork here to keep this going. I don't know, I'm no Mason. All right, so different spokesperson for Team A, please.
I'm going to jump in there because you know I'm going to get this up there.
Early childhood.
Exactly. We have children who show up to school already behind.
Mhm.
And it's because of that lack of that early childhood experience. No preschool experience. They just walk into the school day one and the playing field is not level. And I'm going to say our answer would be universal preschool.
There you go, wonderful bridge. And full-day kindergarten this year for the first time funded at the state level is a huge, giant step in that right direction. But in early childhood, thinking about universal preschool, a lot of these, of course, are going to implicate resources. They're also going to implicate our goals. And this afternoon, we'll be talking about both of those things, goals and additional budget requests. So be thinking about those as we're talking about the bridge side of our wall. Thank you. Team B, another spokesperson.
Another thing that is a wall for children is the trauma, which we included in that, mental health, drugs, home abuse, those type of things, and support services would be, we need more support services.
Comprehensive support services, whole child focus, a real intentionality around the needs of the social, emotional, physical, and academic person. Good. Thank you so much, and thanks for calling that out. I've seen heroic work happening in our school districts post or mid-pandemic around issue how we can support our students and help them reenter despite some level of trauma. Oh, easy way out. No, we needed another line on the bottom. Good job, Claire. All right, thank you. Team C.
I had the fact that our children are leaving primary grades not being able to read, and that the bridge for that would be training in our teachers and legislation on the science of reading and really teaching our teachers how to teach children to read.
All right, I really appreciate the granularity of that. So when we talk about literacy as a struggle from early childhood all the way to the point of graduation, getting strategic about that work, I know that Alex focusing in on that. You'll see that bridge side is about professional learning on the part of teachers. Think about how many responses we could have for professional learning on the bridge side of our wall today. So thank you. Real laser-like scientific approach to literacy. Team A, somebody on this triad.
Mine kind of touched on what Claire was saying too. I said lack of individualized resources for students. And oftentimes when students receive resources, it's through administrators or teachers, and that could, most of the time, be very broad, and it doesn't feel like it resonates with us in a certain way. So I think if we focus on, really getting to know a student, getting to know their aspirations, their needs, and their wants for their life in school, and even after school and post-secondary, we can truly set them up for success in that way.
Excellent, excellent. And thank you so much for the voice of the students, Soliana, which you always represent for us. I do think it's worthy of its own brick. It absolutely complements the lack of engaging curriculum question and this opportunity for student agency, voice, and choice through personalized, she said, resources and materials. So really tapping into students as dignified humans with wants and aspirations and needs. So I love that one. Thanks so much. Team B, we might want to go ahead and just start making some bricks in the interest of time. This otherwise looks like a really silly wall. Sorry. Team D.
This might be 3 bricks, but we have
Okay, go for it.
it was around the teaching profession, the number of teachers that are necessary, the specializations of teachers that are necessary, the support, the training skills that teachers need, and the diversity of teachers. So I would say that was a theme that emerged with just all around all those elements of the teaching profession.
Yeah, educator workforce and all of the myriad faces of that barrier. And then what about the bridge side of that?
Well,
We have Sharon, I know, but that can't just be Sharon, yeah.
recruiting efforts and training and support.
All right, thank you so much. All right, Team C, we're back around to you.
Okay, so I will say, first of all, Teresa, have a whole plate. Elementary school teachers are the best, but Lord have mercy, I could not be one. I can't even put this together.
Yes, drop out.
I volunteered a little RTIU.
I volunteered to scribe over here. I could not teach elementary school. Okay. So to add on to, we mentioned student engagement earlier. I'm going to add on to that with also parent and community engagement, which is two-way street. It's not just dictating that comes from school home and that's the end of the conversation. It's got to be intentional, collaborative outreach.
Excellent, excellent. So real intentionality on the educator side of the equation with families around engagement. And I think we could make a related brick to say the same thing, that the responsibility is not just on the educators in that equation, but when we all own the success of our kids in our schools, I think we see those partnerships grow. Partnerships could be another big overarching theme today. Thank you. All right, I think we have time for 2 more rounds and then some brick building in the meantime. Team A, another brick. I know Amanda's got one. Alice.
I started from I said, the biggest barrier we have in education and have had in education for the 40, 50 years I've been involved is the lack of funding. I said it all starts there. We can't do a lot of those things because we don't have the funding to do it. There's just not enough money in the barrel to do some of the programs we need. Programs like Gifted and Talented. In some schools, it's not existent. So there's no funding. Programs like hiring more guidance counselors, which we are in dire need of because there's simply not enough funding. So my bridge would be to increase tax revenues that are dedicated specifically to education. I think that's how we crawl out of this barrel that this deficit that we're in, is by increasing the amount of resources that we have for our kiddos. And she said not only increase the revenue, but use them. Use the revenues we have, use them wisely. I think that's my barrier and that's my bridge.
Excellent, excellent. I'm so glad we called it out. We're going to be talking about additional budget requests today. It's really important for us at the policy level to begin thinking about what adequacy looks like from universal preschool throughout the system, really focused in on how we use those funds wisely and in the best interest of our learners. Thank you. More bridges happening here. Yep, bridge on this side, barriers on this side. Team B.
Vocabulary and background experiences for aiding students in comprehension and such like that. So just valuing those background experiences and developing vocabulary.
Excellent. That's another one of those granular one that I really appreciate so much, having so many amazing educators on this team, but really kind of zooming in on our core business, the learning experience and the science of the learning experience, I think is really helpful. What's your bridge there, Holly?
I think preschool. I think more like speaking, listening, valuing that dialogue in the classroom, educating parents on the importance of talking to children at a young age, and then PD.
Nice, nice, nice. Yeah, you can have more than one bridge on the other side if you choose. That's awesome. All of these implicate a whole lot more bridges. Absolutely. Team C, back around to you.
We have a real problem with adult first mindset in our schools. And as a bridge is having to force ourselves every time we have a discussion on decision making, how does this impact students? Leave how it impacts the adults in the building off the table, and how does this impact students kind of conversation. And we have to force ourselves to do that because human nature is to think of how does something impact me.
Absolutely.
But when we're in the business of taking care of children, you have to figure out how it impacts them first. And then have the conversation of how to impact adults.
Absolutely. And I like the notion here of mindset. So, we can try to make that tangible, but it's really about the cultural mores and the norms that exist across our systems. I also am always reminded that a student-centered focus is not an anti-adult focus. Instead, my colleague Karen Perry always says, we don't get to student agency on the backs of teacher agency.
Right.
But instead, we keep that laser-like focus on the needs of our students and then develop the adults in the system so that they too are happy, productive learners in the system. So what was your bridge side one more time?
Just making ourselves think first on how does it impact students and then how do we take care of the teachers to make sure that happens for the students.
Good. So that's mission and vision and language about student-centeredness and focus. And then it's also one of your all's other bridges, student agency and voice. I loved your post yesterday a tweet yesterday about Kentucky's student voice heritage. All right, I do think we have time for one more. We're up on the fourth row. It's looking pretty solid to me. I think I would need calculus to determine if in fact it's going to stand, but I couldn't count this morning. So Team A, one last brick. Everybody make all your bricks now, and then we'll see if we can get a photo of this amazing structure. Team A.
So mine, I know you're going to be shocked, is on lack of access to early post-secondary opportunities.
Yes.
And transition. I don't know why I would think something like that.
Why you think that? I don't know.
Kind of live like that. And I'm living it at home. So, so it's really, the barrier is lack of access for all students to really experience any type of early post-secondary opportunity, work-based experience, to get tools in their toolbox to really give them a view of what a future could be, and the bridge to that is increasing communication and support to not just our students, but our families on what really students are capable of and that they are worthy of these opportunities once they cross the stage.
Excellent. I love that as a specific example for the P20 continuum. The work of the Commonwealth Education Continuum has really honed in on that, and a lot of these bridge ideas are starting to bubble up. I'm really optimistic about those outcomes. Team B, one of your last big bricks to share.
Gosh, I think we talked a lot about the in-school. I would add that students have lots of challenges at home, from safe and quiet places to think and work, food insecurity, the necessity of having to work outside of home. So I guess it would bundle it all together and say home supports.
Yeah, larger societal issues around our kids' experiences in the home, totally valid. We don't use that as an excuse in education, but it would be irresponsible of us not to recognize that we have our students for part of the day, not all of the day. So I do think that's really important. And I think it helps educators realize that they must look for partners in this process. We have to stop this notion that we can somehow go it alone. What's your bridge on that one, Team B?
One might be parent academies or parent training. Parents will learn how the needs that their students have to be successful, and that can extend everywhere from infants and toddlers all the way up through high schoolers, and the needs of kids change.
Love it. I love it. And I know that Jacqueline's work has focused so much on those partnerships and connections too. Parent academies are a great one. Sharon.
And one of the concepts that we know helps students feel really efficacious is to help them feel connected to the larger communities as a real viable member and an important member. And so the school community service work represents a really important aspect of that.
Agreed. I love that experience, especially for pre-adolescents and adolescents, where they begin to see themselves as contributors to their own communities. Then helps to really address some of those challenges, along with building the persistence and the resilience and the grit that we know our students need to develop over time. All right, Team C, you get to pick, but I did hear you having a conversation about status quo. That might have gotten into the mindset one, but what's your last big brick?
How about absenteeism?
Okay. We're not applauding absenteeism, we're just glad you discovered it.
That's just a huge barrier to learning, and I think the solution is more parent involvement, more outreach to families.
Yeah, family engagement. I also believe on the bridge side of that a lot of things we talked about today, Jamie, too, in terms of a more engaging learning experience. If kids have a need to be there, they'll be there. The little ones often drag their parents to get ready for school because there's something important happening in school today that I simply can't miss. So
I think transiency too, and in our large districts, that's a particular issue.
Right, and so Soliana and the team over here were talking about belonging, so that kind of the foil for transiency is to help students find a place where they belong, a safe place where they belong at school every day. So big praise. First, the wall stood.
I have one more I'd love to add.
Jump in here, and then you're going to have to all come and admire the wall, but don't touch the table and don't sneeze.
I know. After I saw Jason go over there, I thought, I just held his breath. I thought, maybe I want to wad this up. Maybe I want to do it. But I think it's some of it's going to fall apart if we don't take into consideration our teacher shortage.
Yes.
And all of this is going to start crumbling.
Yeah.
So we discussed grow your own teachers.
Nice. Okay, yes, and so we're going to hear a report today from the Kentucky Academy on Equity in Teaching. We'll hear some of that conversation as well, and that dovetails with Team B's conversation around all things educator quality and workforce, so excellent. So before we debrief the activity, genuine thanks for engaging brilliantly as you did. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm going to get one photo of this before anything bad happens to it. And then what I'd like to do is invite you to come up and do one thing. We can do this just in small groups so as not to knock it over. But one of the interesting things about this activity is that we do have, in fact, a wall. On this side of the wall, your perspective is pretty bleak. We're looking at teacher shortages, language barriers, kids home alone, lack of vocabulary and experiences, a dwindling educator workforce, lack of funding, lack of individual resources for kids, exclusionary discipline practices. It's pretty bleak on this side of the wall. I think that we spend a disproportionate amount of time on this side of the wall. On this side of the wall, we have a much brighter perspective. So this side of the wall gives me hope. Somebody didn't follow directions? These letters are upside down. I love that.
I'm nervous right now.
Okay, you got this. Wait, I'm taking your picture.
Oh,
If it goes down, it's on you. It's on you, Bowling. It's all on you. Oh wait, let me take a video.
Yeah, no cyberbullying.
No, it's in person. Go ahead.
We're here for you.
Thank you.
Oh wait, no, it's backwards. It says absenteeism. Oh. Yeah, that goes on the barrier side.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go. You got it? Oh.
Did she do it?
Okay, great job. Okay. It is like a grown-up Jenga.
Pressure.
Yeah, you did it. You are the hero. So do come take a minute, take a look at it, just kind of wander around to give you a chance to stretch, and then we'll have a brief debrief about your metacognitive thinking about the experience. So let's do that for a minute, stretch, come back around, and then I will wrap.
Madam Chair, I'm going to stay over here. I live with an 8-year-old boy, and there's a strong urge to smash it.
There is an 8-year-old twinkle in his eye. I will leave him on that side of the table. Okay. Boys and girls, you may look at the wall now. That's funny. And you stay away. Pictures? Poor Chase, you need to blamed and
I know, this side feels so much better. This side gives me hope. This side gives me hope.
I'm good, how are you?
That was on the bottom. And it's on the bottom.
Ready for football? Yes. I know, yeah. I saw the news the other day, I was ready for
There's one city on the bottom.
Oh, I need you to fix that. Come on, Jingle, do it.
Still coaching.
And you guys, before we wrap, we do have some coffee on the island over there, so, and I'm gonna get
I think before we have to crown, we try to.
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely, because you can't stay there. Oh, yeah.
With this cut, so, I don't know.
Let me knock it down.
He loves it.
Well, you know what, I still do it like that.
Yeah. He loves it.
I'm gonna go to the challenge, so I can't do it.
Couldn't hold it back.
Yeah, no, I couldn't. Oh, how many have I held in my
You need a marker?
A bag.
Oh, yeah, we got.
You got your time.
He has it's always in the middle.
Yeah.
He'll be here tomorrow.
Okay.
The one that just has to go up, what is it?
Yeah, he'll be here tomorrow. 2 days.
Diversity. I'll call that one out of the deep. Perfect.
Okay, now I gotta see this one.
Yeah, come on. Yep. Done. Just louder, you know.
One turn to the.
That's right. You know.
All right, well, Jason, Randy said, you know, help me do it.
But it's, I don't think so. It's good that they're done that. Y'all are making this not.
Or at least a couple for a photo op. I'll definitely want that.
Yeah, he got a passion.
All right, if I could bring you guys back together, I want to wrap the activity in a couple ways. First, shout out to Soliana and Sharon, who, as they were looking at the wall, they said there's a brick that has to be there. There's one more brick that we didn't touch on. Now, I would concede there's a lot more bricks, clearly, but I think you also did an amazing job from big picture to real granular conversations today. But Sharon, if you would share the conversation that you and Soliana had that led to one more brick, and I'm going to take your picture, putting it up there. Come on, you got this.
I didn't know I was gonna be the game, this is the game changer, I don't wanna tip the wall.
You got it.
We were looking at this and, you know, we were talking about all this stuff is the stuff we talk about incessantly. And valuing diversity, we talk about incessantly, even though we can't seem to manage to make progress that is satisfying.
We do, yeah.
And so we were talking about, well, how do we do that? And we came up with the phrase leveraging diversity. it is part of our work. It is helping our students understand that this is how you get stuff done with diverse disciplines, diverse talents, and discovering all of those talents in all of us is part of the job of learning. So we came up with another three.
Exactly. Excellent. Excellent. All right, here goes.
Like I said.
Nice job. We're gonna knock this wall down in just a minute. Holly pointed out a real obvious takeaway for us that it is our job to knock down the wall on that side of the wall, right? If we were going to try to build a bridge today, we would have built it with the words on this side of the wall. But before we do that, just a couple of questions. As you guys worked individually in pairs and squares, which was easier? Was it easier to think about barriers or easier to think about bridges? No right answer. Barriers, right? I mean, I think generally speaking, those are probably, even the most optimistic of us, it's often just a real weight on us, the barriers that we face. And so I think that we as a board need to make sure that we are fighting against this tendency of humans to admire the problem, but instead to push ourselves to immediately get to the bridge side. One of the things I want to call your attention to is on the back of your name tag. Meredith has put these together, Meredith and Stacy, and we want to make sure that those are there every time. And we borrowed these from a state board in Washington. And we just really liked it. It resonated with the conversation that we as a board team have had. You'll see some big charges at the top, 3 big buckets, and that it is our job as the State Board of Education to collaborate, to identify, and to act. So I think that collaboration was demonstrated really well today. You guys just make my heart happy in the way you're willing to jump in, roll up your sleeves, and give a dopey activity a try. So thank you for that. Most importantly, thank you for the sincere engagement that happened. It is also our role to identify, and you see some questions there. What are the unintended consequences of the decisions that we make? What are those institutional policy barriers, the other side of the wall, problematic practices? And then lastly, for every decision that we make, what impact will that decision have on students? And the last one, that category of act, how will we expose and remove barriers, ensure access to opportunities, and address the practices that cause predictable and disproportionate student outcomes? So I think those are thought-provoking, deep questions for us. And every time we're about to vote, I hope that we get in the habit of glancing at that placard and asking ourselves, here's the decision I'm about to make. Who, what, and how will this decision impact the children and families we serve? Any other closing thoughts about the activity or anything perhaps that went unsaid in the activity today that you want to lean into?
It was interesting to stand before the wall and to stand on the barrier side and then walk around to possible solutions on the other side, and you could feel a sense of relief. Physically feel a sense of relief once you walked around.
Yeah, sure, there's a heaviness in some of the words on the other side. It's our responsibility as state education leaders to leverage the power of perspective. And walking around to the other side of the wall is that kind of tangible experience related to a change of perspective. Holly?
I think something for me, it just reminded me how important it is to have a variety of people around the table. Because, my perspective is very classroom oriented. His perspective was more global kinds of things.
Yeah.
And, I think that there's just so much value in having diverse voices, because we each bring our own different perspectives.
I agree completely and love that observation. I think it also coalesces well with Soliana and Sharon's conversation about leveraging the diversity even among our team. And they're really thinking that other people in this room can push and stretch and pull us when that needs to happen. Collaborate is the first bucket and anchor on our decision-making placard too. So I think that's a great observation. Soliana.
I think also with that diversity that Holly mentioned, we well, our group, we were still able to make those connections, even though, we were talking about different issues, we were able to say, oh yeah, that happens in like my realm, or that happens, through my perspective, and we were able to see the diversity within those barriers.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And the way you stated that too, Soliana, reminded me how thankful I am that this group is very respectful and very willing to listen and seek first to understand in the process. And as I eavesdropped on the group, I heard that same kind of richer conversation because of the contribution of the individual. So the synergy that happens on our team, I think, is really important, and it does speak to diversity and perspective. All right, many thanks. Patrice, you're going to try to pull out that one that's backwards?
I'm going to go work the front, and Jason, you can work the back.
Okay, all right, we got a demolition crew on the way. Wait, I got to get a photo op.
I know, Madam Chair, you've been working on your axe throwing, so I wonder if you could take a gamble.
Right there.
So what we noticed is right in the center, there is one that is turned the wrong direction.
Okay, I've got $5.
And it's on the bottom.
$5 in lottery tickets if you two can pull that out and turn it around.
I'm going to press on the right. Whoa. Let's go to the.
Yes! The 8-year-old boy came through and just no, don't bother. It's our job to knock down the wall. You've been dying to do it all day. And yeah, right. I'll take care of the mess, Meredith. Sorry. All right, thank you. All right, that may be from the ridiculous to the sublime, I don't know, but thank you for the conversation and for the great learning. Next item on our agenda. I think it's Thomas. Yes, so Thomas, I think we couldn't have teed you up better, perhaps. We're going to focus in on equity for some time together this morning. And so this is an update from Dr. Thomas Woods Tucker. And I do think we have some slides that, yes, they are in your portal. Oh, thank you, Megan, for remembering the mic. And I'll turn it over to you.
First of all, good morning to our esteemed board members, Commissioner Glass, Lieutenant Governor Coleman, and our guests who are here. You're right, Chair Bouillon, that exercise really dovetails well into this conversation about equity and ensuring that all of our students here in the Commonwealth, each student, as a matter of fact, has an opportunity to be successful and reach their potential. Dr. Brewer, drop the slides for us, please. We're going to talk a little bit about our definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's great to see how these definitions have begun to coalesce as we continue to have these conversations, whether we're listening to our Commissioner Glass or board members or to our students and staff members across the Commonwealth. Diversity, real quickly here, it's really about individual differences, and it's important that we highlight differences and uniqueness, but at the end of the day, it's about inviting everyone underneath the tent, inviting everyone to the dance, if you will, as we look at personality, learning styles, life experiences, group and social differences, including race or that unclear term race, but certainly ethnicity, socioeconomic class, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, country of origin, differing abilities, as well as our cultural and political religious affiliations that we have. So it's really about engaging all of our students in a way that they can be better learners, that our community here can be better learners. So again, understanding that there are differences, but inviting everyone underneath the tent and inviting everyone to the dance. Okay, equity. Equity is not about demonizing people because of their differences or indoctrinating students. It's not that, and we've said that quite some time. To quote our commissioner, I think when we look at equity, I think he's given us one of the best and most fulfilling definitions, all-encompassing definitions, if you will, of equity. So if Commissioner Glass will allow us to quote him. I'm nervous. Commissioner Glass, and we embody this definition, that equity in education is fundamentally an effort to ensure that all of our students have the supports they need to meet our academic standards and to reach their full potential as students, citizens, and human beings. And equity focus in education recognizes that public school students come to us with a variety of backgrounds, needs, supports, and experiences. And that we must, and I say again that we must take those into account when we consider the education of each child. And that definition reminds me of a law that was passed almost as old as I am, Public Law 94-142. Those are in education. That's our first law that we're taught. And that law provides a free and appropriate public education for all students, regardless of their unique needs, skills, or attributes. So we've been practicing that law, and it's been a federal requirement for almost 46 years now. Next slide, please. Inclusion. So we've been invited to the dance. Now, is anyone going to ask us to dance? So to be really inclusive, someone needs to ask, or we need to ask someone to dance. So inclusion is the intentional act of creating an environment that fosters mutual respect, mutual respectful relationships in which each student, and I would add staff as well, regardless of intellectual, social, cultural, and geographic background, is welcomed, supported, and valued as fully participating members of society in our public schools. And to move from 94-142 to here at the Kentucky Department of Education, we look at, for instance, our equity policy relative to graduation requirements. Again, this policy is a long-standing policy, and there are three segments here. The first is that equitable learning is individualized. That's in Section 2, that we are duty-bound as educators to ensure that we individualize or we personalize education for each student, because we know when we personalize education for each student, those students succeed. Students who have IEPs, we have to personalize their education. And secondly, minimum graduation requirements enable flexibility in each school in the Commonwealth or district's course offering through personalized course requirements, which simply means that you can substitute out some courses. For example, here we need in Kentucky, 4 courses in English. Students can substitute out 2 of those courses, maybe through CTE or dual enrollment. So that's been a very important factor here in Kentucky for quite some time. Again, personalizing education, making it more equitable. And the third section is Section 7. It provides opportunities for students to earn credit through personalized experiences that align with each student's individualized learning plan. That's from 6th grade through 12th grade. So folks, equity in education is not new in the Commonwealth. It's a fantastic thing to ensure that our students have great opportunities to be successful. Next slide, please. So what is our approach to equity? To us, equity is not just about identifying challenges and offering recommendations. It is very much about creating an intentional, ambitious, and urgent path forward for Kentucky districts to improve outcomes for each of our 650,000 plus students. Next slide, please. So now let's talk a little bit about where we are now. I want to talk a little bit about KDE's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan and our Equity Toolkit. We are currently working on an internal strategic plan that involves collaboration across the agency. And I am just overjoyed to know that in each of our agencies, each of our associate commissioners, the directors, and other staff are working towards equity across the agency. So it's not just in the Office of Teaching and Learning. It's just not in the Office of Assessment. It's across the entire agency. And that really is going to bode well as we provide great opportunities for our students. And then I want to talk a little bit about our Equity Toolkit. To the right is a mock-up, is a demonstration, a demo of what will be included in our toolkit. First, the greatest attempt to equity goes back to our standards. As you know now, we are updating our science standards, so ensuring that we have high-quality academic standards that will push students, not just looking at the standards here in Kentucky or the local standards, but also comparing our standards and utilizing standards that are across the country and national standards as well. Also, high-quality instructional resources. We found out that even if we have novice teachers or beginning teachers who are learning the subject matter, like all of us who were first-year educators, if we have a deep understanding of the standards and we have resources that are fully aligned to the standards, our students will experience some growth. And that's what we want to do. When a kid finishes first grade, they should be ready for second grade. Then also our equity dashboard. That's going to be huge. I know there have been several conversations about whether certain student groups are meeting certain standards, whether certain student groups are over or underrepresented, whether it's in CTE or in AP and so forth. Each school district in the Commonwealth will have access to this inward-facing dashboard that will alert them whether there's overrepresentation or underrepresentation in courses like CTE, in discipline and so forth. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Then also the equity playbook. We are excited about putting a request for a proposal to help us create an equity playbook. This playbook will be centered around 5 plays or 5 strategies that have been research proven to raise student achievement. So we're excited about that. Then we're equally excited about the A4 modules. That's a partnership with Higher Ed Council for Post-Secondary Education. So we do appreciate our work with Dr. Thompson with that. We'll make those modules available to all of our pre-service teachers as well as our practicing teachers, our practitioners as well. And you've heard us talk quite a bit about the CAPE funding, the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching. Vina Stewart will come up a little later and talk more about that. But this doesn't mean a whole lot if we don't have at the center a multi-tiered system of supports. It's great to talk about these great academic initiatives, but what are we doing to promote the social and emotional well-being of our students? And this multi-tiered system of supports, which is again, a system that looks at the whole child, and we've done quite a bit of that work here at KDE. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about our equity playbook. There are 5 pillars, as I mentioned earlier. Pillar 1 is student achievement. Each of our respective districts and schools within the district who select to participate in this playbook will have a warning system, if you will, or an alert system that will let our principals, teachers, leadership teams at each school, each district know that there is perhaps a disproportionate number or a number of students or a lack of student diversity, let's say in an AP course or in an IB course if IB is offered. So that's one of the first warning signs there relative to student achievement. Again, it's going to be unique. It's going to be based upon the individual district and the individual schools. We know from experience and we know from research that you have schools that perform differently, even within districts, just like we have districts across the Commonwealth who perform differently. And some schools achieve better than other schools in the district. So this warning shot regarding student achievement is going to be huge. I'm looking forward to that. Again, it's all students. We have all student groups are represented. Then also, we've talked quite a bit about, and there's a ton of research on disciplinary practices and procedures. Is there a disproportionate number of male students or female students or students in any one of our groups who are being suspended more than other students as it relates to the population of that student? So really excited about that. Again, it's an inward-facing tool that's going to be important for each of our respective school districts. And thirdly, high-quality programming and teachers. I talked about that earlier. We know that the biggest influence on student outcomes next to home life This classroom teacher, the teacher who's in front of our students. So we're going to ensure that we ask our school districts to look at their teachers, to look at the number of teachers and their qualifications and certification in certain areas, to ensure that we have the best and brightest, as we do here in Kentucky, that we continue to have the best and brightest in front of our student body, but also high-quality programs. Are we offering these high-quality, rigorous programs to all of our students? Are we looking at barriers? Sometimes we as adults create barriers that keep students from entering into our rigorous courses. So we're looking at removing those barriers and enhancing students' options into those courses. Another thing that's important is the distribution of funding and resources. When we really talk about it, remember we talked about equity. We talked about looking at individual differences and giving students everything that they need. One of the things that I always talk about, I have 4 children. I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and they wear different shoe sizes. If I were to go to Macy's and get all of them a size 10, I'm going to be in trouble with 3 of the 4. So are we giving our students, are we giving our staff, many times we miss out on what we need to provide to our staff, our teachers, and our administrators. Are we giving them the funding to address those gaps that we see in this playbook, that we see in the dashboard relative to discipline, relative to student achievement? And then, fifth, what makes all this happen is a school culture and climate. Are we giving our school districts, our leaders and supports, the necessary tools to support a highly conducive culture for teaching and learning? And so within that particular pillar, our schools will have resources that will help them examine the school culture and climate.
Thomas, may I ask before you go to
absolutely.
the next slide?
Yes.
So this is starting to get clearer and clearer for me, and I love the development. If we look at those first 2 pillars around student achievement and disciplinary practices, and you said these are inward-facing dashboards, and then you also kind of alluded to this notion of early warning system. So as it develops further, if I were a principal, a superintendent, a team lead at my school, I might be able to start seeing flagging of students who those early warning signs are just kind of calling attention to her needs. And I've seen work like that in West Virginia and some other states. Is that where we're headed?
Thank you. We're headed that way. And one of our many astute superintendents raised this question when I presented these research-based pillars. And she said, well, can we, after a while, I know it's going to be inward-facing, if we see trends, as you mentioned, happening, and we see positive trends, which we hope and will ensure that they do happen, can we share that out? Can we go just beyond just sharing out in our amongst our schools in our respective districts? Can we share that across school districts? And the answer is yes, once we begin to see trends.
Thank you.
Yes. So a couple things I want to say about this equity playbook. Again, these are some things here. We're in the demo phase right now. We will go out to we'll do an RFP, which will be coming up, and we'll be looking for vendors to really compete and help us do this important work. Along with it, we're looking, given the proliferation and COVID, with COVID still being around here, we're looking at having virtual professional development and a coaching platform that includes several items here, and I'll go through those first. And foremost, you need to have a needs assessment because our districts are going to have different needs. They're going to be at different levels when we look at those 5 particular pillars. So we'll do a need assessment to identify the needs and measure the growth in our districts. Again, we're going to have variation across the Commonwealth. Make sure that there's content and resources to support our educators in closing these opportunity gaps. We want to ensure that we align it to professional standards. And I also want to say professional development, because many times we leave out high quality professional development. So we want to make sure that we have standards in place, but also professional development opportunities to ensure that our leaders understand how to properly use this playbook and the other tools in the toolkit. Also, competencies are aligned between districts and school roles. We know exactly what's going to be expected as it relates to the roles and coaching. That is huge. Again, it gets back to the professional development, and we want to provide feedback. Many times we deliver professional development, but there's no time for feedback. Feedback is a great opportunity for growth and reflection. Then also networking. Networking is huge. What was successful in District A? You know, you're having this conversation, and you can share what was successful in District A with District B. So this huge business about networking is very important amongst the leaders and the coaches. And speaking of coaches, this is indeed a partnership. I talked earlier about a partnership. This is a partnership with our educational cooperatives. We'll work closely here at KDE and have a point person at each cooperative who will work closely with the school districts in the cooperative. We've sent out a survey to all of our superintendents and educational cooperative directors. As of today, we have about 62 of our 171 school districts interested in a playbook or multiple playbooks. A playbook could be at the district level and also at the school level. And again, this is, our schools can sign up for it. It's voluntary. We hope that every school district in the Commonwealth selects to participate in this because it's going to give research-based strategies to improvement. Now let's switch over. I want to go back, Meredith, to a demo of, this is our, we looked at the playbook earlier. This is our dashboard. This is a dashboard that's being created with our folks here at the Office of Teaching and Learning, but it's also being created in conjunction with Commissioner Glass's dashboard. What's going to be different with this dashboard here, again, it's going to be inward facing. As you can see on the left-hand column, we have all of our student groups, and there are various indicators here. Students who are identified with IEPs, absenteeism. You'll see truancy. You'll also see suspensions, in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension. All of these are things that we know can impact teaching and learning, can impact students' teaching and learning. And once, go back to that warning signal, once we see some disproportionality or we see students who are suspended more than 5 or 10 days, a button will light up, and we're going to use this orange button to alert the school and to alert the district that this is happening, and this is happening with this particular group.
So might we get that updated slide? I'd love to take a.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Could I ask a
Please.
Sure.
So, is this updated almost in real time? How is that?
It will be updated in real time through IC. It will be linked to Infinite Campus.
And what about application at the teacher classroom level?
We're still working on that right now. We do, well, it certainly will be at the building level if building principals and the building principals could tie this into their teachers. So it could be done through Infinite Campus.
And that happens through the scheduling function in Infinite Campus, I would imagine.
We'll have to do that. So when you look at, well, I'm really excited, so I'm going to save this for last one because I'm just overly joyed with the comprehensive nature of this equity toolkit and how this work has been championed by Commissioner Glass, how it's been championed by our folks here here at KDE, and something that, again, 62 of our, about 60 of our school districts have already said that they want to participate in this equity endeavor. So that's really great, and it's just going to give our folks some tools to use in real time.
My experience has shown that teachers know when kids start to turn orange. So having a system that we can share around that kind of triage, just-in-time support for kids, I think has a ton of potential.
Yes, they know right away before the administration knows. And again, you just mentioned it, real time. You know, when we look at a lot of data, those students have gone on to the next grade or they graduated. This will be real-time data. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm a special education teacher, 22 years, so that's where my heart is. And I'm looking at this graph, and I noticed that it includes students with disabilities.
Yes.
It's around the race and ethnicity group. Will special ed students, as far as equity for special needs students, be included in the dashboard? And was the Office of Special Education and Urban Learning consulted in that? I'm just curious where they landed in this.
Yeah, we're in the demo stage now. We're going to continue to get feedback. And also, Board Member Sloan, if you look to the far left-hand column, you'll see all students represented. So it goes beyond ethnicity, it goes beyond race. And again, those were just some examples there, as I said earlier, with students with disabilities. And what I really like is drilling down to the different student groups. I mean, do we have white students? Do we have Hispanic students being suspended or not in our higher level rigorous courses at a lower clip than others? So that's great information that we can use in real time and can go back and make adjustments.
I guess my question is will we be looking at some point in time in this dashboard about students with disabilities and their absenteeism and their disability?
Oh, absolutely, yes, absolutely. Yeah. We should, those are just 4 categories right there, but you'll see a multitude of students on the far left side. Again, those are just 4 examples right there. When we click over to the next page, once this is done, it'll have all those groups there. And much of this data, as you all know, is already in Infinite Campus. It appears on report cards. This is bringing the data in real time at just one single click. You don't have to go all over the place to pull in the data.
So we'll ask Thomas to finish up the slide deck, and then we'll open up for some questions. Just a reminder, these masks really muffle us. So when you do have a question or a comment, do project your voice over the masks, please.
And the next item here, again, we continue to talk about our partnership, whether the partnership is with our education cooperatives. This here is a partnership with the Council on Post-Secondary Education, and it's the A4 modules. 2 of the 4 modules are completed right now, acceptance, action, awareness, and acknowledgement. And I won't talk too much about it. Vita Stewart will come here in a little bit and talk more about these 4 models. But again, it's a partnership between the KDE and the Council for Post-Secondary Education. And it's really a framework that's aligned to provide individuals with the knowledge and skills to work better with a diverse group of students from diverse backgrounds and adults as well. And these modules will be made available to our pre-service teachers as well. Again, Vita will talk more about that. So continuing the conversation in terms of where we are now, this is a quick recap here. You all have seen this slide before. And whenever I'm speaking, and I'm speaking generally on this about once a week or every other week, I want to remind people our first line of equity begins with ensuring that every student here, regardless of what part of the Commonwealth he or she resides, that they have access to grade level appropriate learning through our standards. I mean, that is huge. And I've talked about the Council for Chief State School Officers who are helping us with providing high quality instructional resources. We do have a pilot that's coming up and excited about it. In fact, it's going to, going to ask for approval for the letters program, literacy program, and in our work with ANET. This is something we've asked for funding for quite some time. We're thankful that we now have the money through the ESSER and ARP funds to make that available to ensure students have access to this high quality literacy program. So again, more dividends for students. And then also our multi-tier system of support. I can go on and on again about that, looking at not only the academic, but also the behavioral and social emotional learning of students. When I talk with Soliano and other members of the Commission of Student Advisory Council, they don't talk a whole lot about the academic learning loss. They know it's important. And Lieutenant Coleman's work is really important when she begins her work in having these roundtables with students to discuss the social and emotional aspect of what's happening in our schools. And I would say it's not just because of COVID. These things were happening across this country before COVID. COVID has just illuminated it. And that's what, when I talk with young people, students. That's the first thing. Not so much the learning loss. We have the best teachers in the entire country, best administrators, best support staff, best superintendents. They'll work hard and close those gaps. When you hear about students struggling, and their families are struggling too. Generally, if a student is struggling, their family members are struggling as well. And the number of students committing suicide, that's our main work. And I'm so happy to be in a place that recognizes that and that is committed to addressing those needs. Next slide, please. We'll continue to, heard me talk about the equitable practices policy scan. We'll continue to get feedback all year long. We open this up in November, starting with our superintendents and our teacher advisory council, then our student advisory council, and we just opened it up to everyone in the Commonwealth. So please go to our website and provide us feedback on equitable practices that are working in your respective districts, equitable practices that are needed. Sort of like the exercise we just saw here, you know, looking at the challenges and looking at the strengths, the weaknesses, and opportunities that are happening in respective districts to provide students an opportunity to be successful. Because that's what this is really about. Leveling the playing field and providing all students, regardless of their background, an opportunity to be successful. It's not about any theoretical stuff that's out there. It's about ensuring our students are successful. If they're successful, the Commonwealth will be even more successful. So we want your feedback. We want your input. And we know this is tough work. This is difficult work, but please, don't stop what you're doing. And then, as I said earlier, Vita will talk more about the funding for the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching and our efforts to not only recruit a more diversified workforce. And when we talk about diversified workforce, it's more than just ethnicity, it's more than just race. It's also about socioeconomic status. And that's one of the biggest hurdles when we look at student achievement in this country. It's about socioeconomic status. And so it's more than just race and ethnicity. But it's also important for us to work hard to retain all of our minority teachers, because we know from research and personal experience, when students have mentors, they have role models, the power of role models in front of them, they do much better in school. Some of our next steps, we continue to seek funding to support a budget for $31,250 to provide us additional funding opportunities to work with professionals to come in and provide us professional opportunities along the lines of diversity, equity, inclusion, to provide us resources as well. We're rolling out the Equity Toolkit. We hope that training will be available in October and the location to be determined. And we want to select 2 individuals from each co-op that will be part of our proposal with our equity playbook to lead the equity work, and then we'll provide training as well, 2 days of training that will include training for the dashboard, the playbook, and the A4 cultural competency modules. Then also we'll ensure that we're training district and school level leaders on our equity toolkit.
There's a more substantial budget request in the ABR conversation this afternoon, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I do want to apologize. When I submitted the first request, it was for 1 year. And so while there's a substantial request, it's for 3 years of funding as opposed to 1 year funding. Yeah. And before we open it up to questions and answers, some of you I know saw Board Member Young and ran into Board Member Pope early. We're at CASA's, Kentucky Association of School Administrators Fall Conference. It was my first conference with CASA. Very impressive, well attended, and great sessions. And during the opening session, a former, now retired, former music teacher and assistant principal.
He's actually still chief academic, or still an assistant superintendent in Boone County.
Boone County.
Jim Detweiler.
Yeah, Jim Detweiler came up and he told his story about being a cancer survivor And he also talked about some other hurdles in life that he's dealing with. And he talked about how important this equity work is. He talked about how important that we all work together to provide opportunities for everyone. And Jim's quote was this. He said, "We were assigned to this mountain to show others that it can be moved." And this is a man climbing this, I don't know, seemed like it was Mount Everest or something. It was Mount, yeah. Where there's, 50% oxygen? And he had all of these health problems. And he'd been given, I think, 5 years to live. And now he's surpassed the 5 years and still working, as Chair Lou Young says, in Boone County. And so if Jim can survive this huge mountain, can move this huge mountain, we can do this when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion for all students.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We're doing pretty well on time. We've got Vita slated for 10:40, but let's make sure we have this opportunity. It is a retreat. We won't be dragged by our agenda. So what questions might you have, or further information for Thomas as he's thinking about this work?
Thanks for the update, and it's inspiring, and so it brought to mind a line from one of Nikki Giovanni's poems, "An ounce of truth benefits like a ripple on the pond." So it seems that this toolkit and this approach is helping folks kind of put their finger in the water, make themselves available to information that could easily be ignored and the implications almost dismissed, except that others are seeing it. So I view this as kind of scaffolding our colleagues across the state and helping them face some difficult information and have difficult conversations. But the other ripple on the pond, I was happy to be reminded that there is a more robust budget request associated with this, because I think we've got to have a communication strategy. To create further ripples out there would be a strategy of letting other folks know that we're doing it here, and having folks understand, well, I can do it too, like climbing that mountain and showing that it can be moved. We can have these conversations. So I think we've got to think about how we strategically help folks become aware that throughout the Commonwealth, folks are taking on these issues, because that will encourage others to do it.
Excellent. Thank you. Randy?
Yeah, I just want to applaud you on the work. I think this is really shaping up to be excellent, and continue that. And I'd like to also echo the fact that where you talked about social mobility, that's the root of this diversity issue. It's not a black or white issue that we're hearing about throughout this country. It's really the social mobility, taking care of children that haven't had the resources to do it on their own. So as that communication strategy, I think the other underlying thing is this is all about the opportunity gap that we have, the achievement gap, whatever you want to call it. The only way for us to continue to do this is to do this particular work. So I applaud you, and continue to be bold. We've got our critics out there, whoever, but they don't understand what we're doing. This is the underlying work that everybody that got into education or sitting in a superintendency chair should be working on, is how to eliminate the opportunity gap. And that's going to be through social mobility and what you're doing here in diversity. So I applaud you.
Thank you for those comments. We have a really talented team, and the support from our commissioner and folks across the Commonwealth with this work. And we certainly applaud the courageous and bold move by the board last July in passing a resolution.
Dr. Wood, I heard what Randy said. It's not a black or white issue. It's a social mobility issue. but I think it goes farther than that. I mean, even when people of color are socially elevated to a higher economic status, the problem still exists with race. I mean, it just is. I mean, we can't put our head in the sand and say it does not exist. You know, I'm a middle-class black family. My children's got more problems than a middle-class white. It just is. So I just wanted to throw it in there, and that's why it's so much more difficult for us to solve this problem, because race is front and center in this educational mobility that we face in this country.
And I couldn't agree more with you. And if you look at the dashboard, it pulls out ethnicity and race as one of the huge factors that we're challenged with. Yes.
I appreciate that too, and I'm glad to hear these ripples of truth this morning in a lot of different conversations. One I want to add, and I probably am preaching to the choir, knowing this guy and this team, but anything that you and your team can do to hear directly from students about their lived experiences around equity, inclusion, and diversity, I think will only make this work deeper and stronger, and the likelihood of sustainability will be greater. It's hard at the agency level, to get some real kids, but fortunately, thanks to Slack and Google Hangout and Zoom, there are ways that we can really tap into this palpable movement around student voice in agency in the state, and just, making sure we hear from families of color, families from different geographic regions, families of kiddos with disabilities, families of color. The more we can tap into that family voice is critically important, but I think sustainability comes in making sure that this work is relevant to and resonates with kids, and that their experience changes. So preaching to the choir to a certain extent, but just always reminding you and your team that we want to know about kids' lived experiences.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I did not thank again Soliano and other members of Commissioner Glass's Student Advisory Group, and not only the video, the informational video that they put together, but the other endeavors that they're going to take on. And this is a grassroots effort by students. This is not anything where KDE has said or I've said to students, we need to go out and promote this. They've had a couple meetings already. Tony Cummings-Tapman, Communications, has done a tremendous job in helping us provide opportunities, a forum for students to communicate their concerns across the Commonwealth. And so I'm really excited about the next activities, whether it's a podcast or I know they put a couple op-eds out.
Yep. Caleb Bates is trending on Twitter.
Yes. So excited about those efforts and what they're going to do here during the 21-22 school year.
I think that team is really even willing to go into the belly of this beast and look at dashboards and think about what that means. How does that feel if you're the kid and you're a bubble on that screen? How does that resonate? Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for this. It's long overdue work, but I'm so glad to see that it's happening and it's being operationalized. I think that is the key here. Is so oftentimes we know these challenges exist and we talk about it, and it becomes a buzzword, and adults don't necessarily do anything about it. And so I'm so grateful that this is something that we are looking to our kids to engage in, but also to the adults. I think just to kind of put a bow on what they said, I think it's really easy to just acknowledge that they say be kind, everybody's fighting a battle we know nothing about, and it looks different even if the battle is labeled the same, right? And so one thing I would point out is I would be about halfway through my career now if I was still in the classroom. And in my undergrad training, I had no instruction or support around mental health services, social and emotional well-being, those types of things. I mean, it was classroom management, curriculum, those types of
Getting
things.
ready for the test.
Yes, and so I say that to make sure that we understand that there's a great potential here that at least half of the teaching workforce probably did not have any, it's really unlikely that they had any formalized training in these areas or awareness in these areas. And so as important as it is to make sure that we confront the challenges that are right in front of us, I think teaching our teachers how to confront those issues is going to be critical too. As you said, the challenges that are coming out of the pandemic existed before. They're just illuminated. And I think the stat yesterday I saw was Kentucky's suicide rate increased by 49% over the pandemic. But the year before, the drug overdose rate increased by 54%. So those problems that exist in our families that we have to acknowledge but can't use as an excuse, they look different wherever we are. But in addition to helping these students, we've got to help our teachers know how to see and confront. Because I will tell you right now that if I was still in the classroom, I would be looking for help everywhere I could find it on how to do that because I didn't have that formal training. And so I know we're hungry, the workforce is hungry for that. And you guys have done such a phenomenal job of putting this together. I can't think of a better team to lead that process for our teachers as well as our students. So thank you.
Please.
I'd like to take a moment to reflect and ask the board to think on the resolution that you passed about this time last year that really set the charge for the agency and the staff on this. And it's really a moment of celebration to see how far this work has come in this year. So Thomas, commend you and the team that has worked on this. Thank you, board, for giving us the direction and your courage and carrying that out. We certainly can see clear-eyed about how much we have to do and how far we still have to go. But I hope you can also see the progress that we've made, and that started with the resolution that you set for us, so thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Team. It was July. One other comment comes to mind. We have a education workforce out there that is, you cannot ask for more valiant and heroic effort than what we saw educators deliver in this past 18 months. It's like really learning on the run and getting it done. But also, we have had an explosion of knowledge about learning in the past 10 years that we did not learn in our undergraduate and sometimes graduate programs because it's come from multiple disciplines. It's taken a long time to get into our professional development, but it seems to me that, while this is about race, but it's also about individual practice and individual learners. There's so many facets of practice that I think we have to think about as you're talking about the implementation process. So I guess I'm just kind of focusing on teachers as learners or educators as learners because school leadership practices are going to change. School organization can change to be more amenable to some of the practices that our students really need. So this is a leverage for innovation as well, and we got to support people doing innovation. That ain't easy either. So, this is pretty strategic and systemic. I think we all know that, but we also need to challenge ourselves to understand what to do about it to support the folks who have to make it happen.
Agreed, and leading innovation is a different challenge in terms of leadership. Patrice?
I agree 100% with what you said. We have been crippled for at least a decade on professional development funding. At one point in time within the Commonwealth, we were the shining star on if you need that professional development, it is going to be personalized for you. You go and get what you need. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. And I saw so much growth in our teachers. And now then, because of not having those available funds, we are put into a corner of one size fits all professional development thrown out there. Our mountains need specified. It needs specific. We need to go back to this is what this community of teachers would need. I'm so ready to see that start moving back in that direction because I agree 100% with what you said. We have some gaps out there that need to be closed because we've changed. We've changed as a society. We've become more aware. We've got to close those gaps, and we've got to do it with some training.
All right, excellent. We're still doing pretty well on time. I see the CIE team is here, but Ms. Vida, thank you so much, Thomas. And Vida, if you want to come on up, either join Thomas and the two of you take it away, that would be awesome. And you do have this slide deck in your portal, and she's going to unpack for us the latest work around the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to share about the updates in the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching. And so, next slide, please. So just reviewing our why and our how, and of course, we always start with our why, and we are, you and our team, we're committed to this equity work, to equitable practices, to diversifying our teacher workforce, and it is a priority. And so it is necessary, it's critical, and it is, and I love the words that have been used this morning, leveraging that those equitable practices and promising practices that we need in teaching. And so and how do we do that? We have to recruit the best and the brightest, and we have to recruit a diverse teaching force. Not only do we need to recruit, our team is talking every day, not just about recruitment, but retention. And we had a long conversation, maybe a 20-minute conversation, and we talked about recruitment, and we talked about retention, and we want to take it all the way to retirement. And then I came up with the fourth R. It was return, because then we want those teachers to return and give back and be alumni. So yeah, I told them I'm branding that now. But yes, so that's what we want. And so we're doing that by inspiring and preparing our educators. Next slide, please. And so the inspired part, of course, the Grow Your Own initiatives, cultivating those future educators, and we want to reach them through teaching learning pathways and reach them earlier and earlier. So we have some things coming along to really make sure that we're reaching them at an early age and that they are invited in to the teaching profession very early so that we can grow our own and grow from within. Currently, we have Grow Your Own grants that came in, and they came in, and the deadline was in June, and so they're currently under review, and these are innovative programs within districts around Grow Your Own with a teacher learning pathway and educator rising. And so those awards will be announced. There are 10 of those, $10 $50,000 awards that will be announced August the 16th. And so as another part feature of the Grow Your Own, we're excited that we've been able to create teaching learning pathway curriculum resources for our students, for our teachers to use with our up-and-coming leaders in education in the classrooms. And then we're just strengthening and increasing our Ed Rising chapters. And so that is kind of the working arm, CTE of the teacher learning pathway and the teacher. And so we want to increase those and grow those. And you'll hear a presentation later today that kind of gives the glows of this growing program, so I won't steal their thunder. again, around Inspire, the Go Teach Kentucky. And this is just to communicate and inspire students. And so we have an ambassador program, which we just completed with a second cohort. And it was an awesome closing ceremony. The reflections were very powerful about their journey and their growth, but about them sharing about the profession and really in a positive light. And so teachers in the field encouraging others to come along. And I always tell people in the way that in my faith that you always say sheep beget sheep. So it's like those teachers going out and recruiting other teachers is powerful. Their stories, their whys, and their is very important in that. And so the next cohort for the teacher ambassadors will be taking place very soon. The application process will go out later this month, and then around October, the new cohort will be out there on social media platforms, being very positive and bringing others into the field based on their positive experiences.
Mia, do the first cohort folks still remain engaged, or?
Yes, that is something that we have talked about, the alumni of those cohorts coming and mentoring new professionals. This is my first time around with a cohort. I kind of got on the end of the second cohort, and some of the from the first round, it was my understanding that there were some that decided to come back in the second cohort, and so there was a mixture of both new ambassadors and previous ambassadors that were able to support one another. So that kind of mentoring opportunity. And then in the Prepare, the mentoring and assessment in coaching, we know how important that is. And so that has been an area that we really want to focus and really have some strong bounds around. And so we have a partnership with CKEC, and they are going to provide that mentoring service and remove those obstacles. And so one of the things that they are going to do is actively seek out mentors. There may be a very targeted approach. There may be mentoring that is needed. There is also removing the barrier of the assessment, so helping with preparation for assessments, and then also reimbursements for assessments. And we're excited that there's been a new associate director hired to really lead the CAPE work, and that's David Morris. And after talking with him and having some interaction, we're really excited about what is going to come forth, and just some innovative ideas around that. And then the educate part of that, the cultural competency modules, again, our partnership with CPE with their content. It's the work of Dr. Erin Thompson in collaboration with Dr. Don Offit, the Aid to the Poor modules, which is awareness, acknowledge, acceptance, and action. As we just stated, the first two modules are in production and almost ready to go. We will have a training October the 20th and 21st, a 2-day training, again, around the equity dashboard, the equity modules, the equity playbook, and the A4 modules. And so we're excited about that. And so that's going to include a facilitation guide for the trainers with PowerPoints, activities for deeper learning resources. We understand that we have opportunities for asynchronous and synchronous learning, real-time learning, and so we're excited about the learning opportunities and strategies that will be aligned with that. We also will have a participant hand kind of guide as well, and so those are all in production and ready to go. And we're doing a train-the-trainer type of model with our co-op partners. And so we're excited that our co-op partners are going to be inviting districts in and to train them in the A4 modules. And again, our target rollout date is the fall for our training for our co-ops. And then immediately after, the co-ops will have the opportunity to disseminate the modules to the larger audience, all of our school districts, and we hope that many will participate. Of course, it's on a voluntary basis, but we're excited about the opportunity to share this work with them.
All right,
Good, we're at questions. Just a couple things on that. One, I would really like if you could share the modules with us. I think it would be a really good practice for us to do them as well, and to go through them and be a part of that. I had another point, and then I'll forget what it was.
I think you were going to ask, do our higher ed colleagues have access to them too? That's what I was
It was kind of originated with our higher ed colleagues, and their department has walked through it, and so it's already focused around that, so definitely.
Yes. That give you enough time to
Oh,
go
I
to that
know.
question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Luke.
Sure. I would like to figure out how we can, possibly track and kind of encourage and cheer on the districts who take that on, right? I don't know if we could do a payout or something. To just acknowledge and highlight those districts that jump in and do the, maybe we'll have a bandwagon effect on that too. So that would be really cool to do, to publicize that and give them a pat on the back.
Definitely.
Yeah, so Vita, if you could keep us posted, even just at every other month, would be awesome.
Yes, we can do that. Definitely do that.
Will the universities go through the co-ops also? Like, is that where they will get training?
So that's not what the thought is right now. Dr. Thompson and Dr. Offit have already worked through this because the public universities and KCTCS campuses have to have a DEI plan with evidence of their growth and their movement, and that is publicly reported every year. And so this is a part of their work. So they're actually working on a micro-credential that is required from the faculty. It is offered, so the CPE module will be offered as an option, but some of the campuses have already moved forward with this work. And so that's what Dr. Offit is working on through her DEI team, is how is the micro-credential being earned. And so I can bring you an update on that next time, honestly, because that's exactly what she's working through. But that's exactly this, and it's 8 to the 4th model is what Dr. Thompson wrote in, I think it was 2007, but it's really a learning model. And the first 2 modules was really just on awareness and acknowledgement. And so those, to me, were the most powerful. We did this as an entire CPE. So it's not just the info, but it's the conversation. And it's a great deep dive into everything we talked about today, race, ethnicity, gender, able-bodiedness. There's a lot of things we take for granted, that we just are not aware of. And so it's awareness of ourselves and awareness of others, and then it builds into acknowledgement. And it goes all the way through action. And so it's a continuous improvement cycle, because we're always growing as humans. So that's what the universities have been working on with Dr. Offit and her group. And so they're working on a micro-credential that will be required for their faculty, and then at least a certain point to where all students would experience that. But that looks a little different per campus, and so they're using their DEI framework to work through some of that, and I know she's in the process of that, and have shared that out with our council recently of their progress. So I'll be happy to make sure that you will have that update as well. So and with the power of this, that I get to work with Vita, and I love it, is that we really have some consistency in conversation of what's going on in K-12. It really is like a P20 experience of definitions and understanding and awareness, and it builds out. It doesn't just stop at K-12 or doesn't just stop in post-secondary, but it's that continuous conversation and awareness. So,
and we really were strategic with the first, starting with those first 2 modules, because the who I am, the how I am, before we even get to any of the heavier stuff, it's really that self-reflection, that self-identity, really strengthening that around things maybe that we hadn't thought about. So we're very excited to see those first 2 modules and really see the self-reflection and the internal work to get to the external work.
But to Jacqueline's point earlier, just to make sure, did I hear you say that not just for educator preparation faculty, but for pre-service teachers?
It is for the campuses is the expectation. And so there are different components in the DEI framework for the public universities. So it's really campus-wide is the expectation, but it looks a little different, and that's for public universities and the KCTCS campuses, what CPD oversees.
So that work is moving and going really well. So it's just another piece of that capacity building and professional learning and really a big awareness piece.
Indeed, I believe the first 2 modules can be released prior to those 2.
Yes, that will be the first 2 modules that will be released first, and then in the spring, the next 2 modules.
That was a question I asked.
Yes, okay,
Get the right
yes,
answer. Thank you.
yes.
Are there any last questions before we transition? Soliana?
Yeah, so I also had a question kind of towards Lieutenant Governor's point as well, and a comment just of sharing the trainings and the modules and all this with the student organizations and student programs, just like you said, of Educators Rising, and other teacher pathways as well. I think students will really benefit from that and learning to that and seeing what they have in the future as a future educator.
Yes. And there's already within the teacher learning pathway, those equity frameworks that are happening as well, yes.
Yeah, so, just for also maybe providing specific student, maybe trainings, maybe seminars towards that would be great. And also honing in on the student transition towards becoming an educator for students of color and, other students as well.
Definitely, yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great work, you guys. This is wonderful.
All right, thank you guys so much. We really, really appreciate the update and all of the important work that happened behind the update. Thank you. All right, we're doing great on time. Board members, I'm sorry, Meredith will never give us a real break, so just do a short and break as you need to break. But I'm thrilled to invite the team from the Center for Innovation and Education up to the hot seat. And I don't think I have any notes except to say that they are here. I am thrilled to see that they are here. Jean, I'll ask you to introduce the whole team. And then Karen, I think you're actually starting us off.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Gene Lovely. Some of you may remember me. A long time ago.
Some of us may be in your fan club.
It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I have 2 members of the center team with me this morning. 2 of the 3 people who've been working with the department, as, by the way, wonderful relationship with this team, Commissioner. First of all, Gretchen Morgan is sitting next to Karen. Gretchen is, I first met Gretchen when she was with the Colorado Department of Education, the deputy there. She has experience as an educator. Prior to that, but was really the leading policy person at the department for those years. We were lucky to have her come with us. And then Donnie Tran is next to me. And Donnie brings to us youth. He brings to us also a background in working with local communities. She was with the Boston School District for a number of years as a strategic planner for that district, and then with the Atlanta School Board. So we were balancing here the state perspective with that of the local practitioners, and so he's particularly adept at working with community groups and agencies. The other person I'll mention who is watching you right now,
Hey, Paul.
Paul Leather, who is the 3rd member of this group that's leading the conversation. So, Karen?
Yeah. Thanks. Good morning, everyone.
So glad to have Karen here with us, and Karen and the team are going to get us working this morning a little bit like what we did in our intro this morning. So just get ready for that. I have been advised by the tech team that the mics are really hot. So even in your breakout sessions, don't say bad words, and remember that we can hear you. So,
thank you, Chair. Go to the next slide. So this is just to put things in context. I'm going to be very brief, and then I'll turn it over to our partners here, Gretchen and Donnie. First of all, I just wanted to level set. So what is the purpose of this project? This is the Advancing Education Project. And the purpose is to utilize effective listening techniques and co-create tools and resources with diverse stakeholders for the purpose of meeting the needs of students, families, educators, and community leaders by changing how we educate in Kentucky. On the next slide, you'll see all the different components of this project. So the Keep Stop Start survey, which we did last fall. We had the Commissioner's Listening Tour. We've been having courageous conversations, the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education, Local Laboratories of Learning, also known as the L3, Student Mental Health Forums, and then Kentucky Future of Education Summit. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that, as I mentioned, the survey was done in the fall of 2020, and we had some really good feedback on that, some good themes that came out of it, but it also was right in the middle of the pandemic, and so there was a huge flavor of what wasn't working with virtual learning and virtual teaching. And so although we learned a lot, we still felt like we needed to do more to have that effective listening that we really wanted. And so from there was born the Commissioner's Listening Tour. That listening tour, that was virtual tours that we did in the 8 regions throughout Kentucky. And then I think we actually ended up having 2 in Louisville and then a separate one for the deaf and the deaf community, I believe it was. So from there, at the same time, we had these courageous conversations going on. So this is where we had the empathy interviews happening. Not just questions about what do you like or what don't you like about things that you're seeing in education, but really listening to the stories of everyone out there, of the students, of the teachers, and other educators. So it was more questions about what has gone well for you, or what good news did you receive? What kind of feedback have you recently received? And really listening to the stories of all of those who were willing to share with us. And that's something that continues to go on. So even as we have started the coalition and go into the L3s, those courageous conversations with those empathy interviews is something that's going to continue. We are right now in the coalition phase. That actually started in June. I have July on there, but it started in June. And every Tuesday in June, the coalition met. We had several folks, we ended up with about 62 members in the coalition. Some of those came from the listening tour, people who, anybody that attended was invited to apply to be a part of the coalition. We specifically reached out to students and parents to be members of the coalition. And I'd say any given Tuesday, we had over 40 of those participating on a regular basis. So very good participation. I'm not going to go any further on that because these folks are really going to dive into the work of the coalition. So starting this fall is going to be the local learning laboratories. They're going to be developing similar to our coalition, but at the local level, and that will continue throughout the spring of 2022. Then in September, as was already mentioned, the student health forums that the Lieutenant Governor is leading. And then finally, in November, the summit that we plan to have with some national speakers and hopefully a whole lot of folks in attendance. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Paul and Gretchen. I'm sorry, Donnie and Gretchen.
Paul's with us too.
In spirit.
In spirit. He's listening closely. So first, just want to say hello. I'm Gretchen Morgan. Pleased to be with you all. As Jean said, I used to work for the Colorado Department of Education, so finding myself in front of a state board is sort of nostalgic in today. I'm happy to be with you. So we're going to share with you some about what the coalition has been up to and also what they've produced. And as Lou previewed, you're going to have a chance to really kind of get into pairs and engage with some of the work of the coalition together. So we're looking forward to that. So go ahead, next slide. So as Karen said, we are here. We are in the coalition time. Go ahead and advance. The next couple clicks. Yeah, even one more. Perfect. So what has the work of the coalition been? So as Karen indicated, the coalition has been gathering insights from across the Commonwealth,
And that has happened in the form of really first taking data out of the listening tour data and trying to find sort of patterns and trends there, but then going out and having these empathy conversations with people that Karen described, which really are a way for us to invite someone to share their story about what it feels like to play their role in the education system in the Commonwealth. And so in the coalition, there are students, there are family members, there are community members who are not students or family members or teachers, and there are teachers and school leaders and district leaders. And each of them reached out to others, right, in this empathy process. So it isn't just that we heard from the members of the coalition reached out and had these empathy conversations with others, really from all around the state. So our job in the coalition is to gather those insights from across the Commonwealth and then to synthesize those into these first two reports, one of which you're going to delve deeply into today, the current state report and the future state report. And really the goal of the current state really is just to capture what do people say is the current condition. And as Karen alluded to, it's an interesting moment in which to capture those stories because certainly COVID is a big story in this time. But there are plenty of things in that current state that are also not about COVID, that are just about people's experiences over their years in public education in the Commonwealth. And so there's a lot of value in that. And then the future state report, which really is having listened to folks about the current state and their hopes for the future, can we synthesize together what people really want for the future of education in Kentucky. Then we're trying to identify what we need to learn to keep moving. If you'll click once more, that leads to another product, which is something we call a learning agenda. What that really means is to get from the current state to the future state, we're assuming we need to learn something. Can we identify the questions that are going to help us inquire about the most important things to help us find our way from the current state to where we want to go? Next click, please. One more, actually, too. Thanks. If I had my own clicker, it would be so much more graceful right now. I'm sorry. Then the last job of the coalition is to practice being inclusive partners with one another for a variety of reasons. One is just that we want the work of the coalition itself to be work that is welcoming of all of these different voices. It's easy to invite students into a place but not really give them voice, or to invite families in and not really give them voice, or as an educator, when you start to feel uncomfortable, to kind of exert your expertise, to kind of shut down the voice of a learner or a family member. And so we worked really hard in how we work together in the coalition to be practicing working together in ways that gave space for and really listened to and acknowledged and captured the feelings and ideas and concerns and excitements and aspirations of everybody. And we wanted to do that to have a good product, but also we're writing some guidance. So that inclusive process guide is something we're sharing with local communities who are going to do work like this going forward. So on this slide, you can sort of see Coalition produced those 4 artifacts. We are producing, more accurate, those 4 artifacts. Those are all going to be shared with these local laboratories of learning. As Karen said, we refer to those as the L3s because local laboratories of learning is kind of a mouthful. But the idea here is that there are local communities in Kentucky who are very interested in pursuing some of those questions about how do we get to the future state that we want to get to. And they are interested in being able to pursue those questions in the same kind of way that the coalition has been pursuing them, bringing students and families in and community members in, working with the educators in those communities. They're also interested in doing that in some partnership with other communities across the Commonwealth. The L3 communities, many of them are districts who would identify themselves as being equity-centered innovators already, but they also really want to be part of a statewide process. They want to be part of a process where they feel like they'll have help in learning from peers and in other communities, but also that their learning will go somewhere, like to this room, And so those local laboratories, we think, are really important to support well, and the coalition is really giving that support in the form of these 4 documents to help kind of kick off their work. So we wanted to mention that, part of the reason the L3 communities feel that way is they've really received a whole bunch of sponsorship and support from you all already. You all passed an equity resolution that is meaningful to the field and feels like something that is inviting people into inquiry, actually, that there are things that you believe the state needs to learn. Dr. Glass and Chair Young also offered their sponsorship to the coalition, and then were very active participants. As like partners to you all, we always sort of wonder, like, are these guys coming? But you guys are in, fully in, and invested in expressing your desire to hear from and learn from members all the way through that process. And that sponsorship and that demonstration of curiosity is very important. Oh, can you go back, please? Sorry. Thanks. Oh, go back one more. Great. Also, in terms of the L3 communities, Dr. Class and the department have engaged members of those L3 communities in the coalition itself. So there were members of those communities who participated in the coalition. They've also committed to investing in some support for them to pursue these lines of inquiry that they're interested in. And again, importantly, have made a clear commitment to listen to and learn from and do something to be responsive to that learning. I think it's easy in a district, far away from the state capital to feel like you might do and learn things, but that the state doesn't have great mechanisms to respond to what you do, to respond to what you learn. And there's a real strong commitment on the part of this department and this leadership to find ways to be responsive. All right, now go ahead. Sorry. All right, so in terms of your engagement with the coalition, today you're going to engage with the current state report and really dig into some of the user profiles, which are a way to kind of synthesize and pull together the viewpoints of different people around the state. And you're going to explore some future state and learning agenda kind of implications. We're not going to delve deeply into those because the coalition is still working on those products, but we're going to show you kind of how those work and talk about the implications for you. In the future, like in October, you're going to receive all 4 of these final reports from the coalition. And you're going to consider endorsing those reports or expressing support for the L3 communities. The L3 communities will be launching their work about that time. And there's an opportunity for you to express interest, right, in their work. In the future, you'll be able to learn alongside those L3 communities, right? They'll be able to share insights with you along the way as they do their local work. And then you all will be able to consider policy or practice implications or actions that you may wish to take. Again, we don't know. This is like a little bit uncomfortable in some ways. Like, we don't know what they're going to discover. And so we can't say right now, like, you better be ready for this action in 4 months. We're going to wait and see. Right? We're going to wait and see what really emerges from the communities across Kentucky. But we do want to say to you, there may be a way for you to respond to them. Right, go ahead. So we're going to start with the current state report. The report is organized this way, the full report, and I think you all have copies of that. It starts with an overview of the data collection process. It shares Commonwealth level themes, right, themes across different kinds of stakeholders in the Commonwealth. And it has a section per user, which really just means stakeholder, right? So a section for students, for family members, for community members, teachers, school and district leaders. We're going to begin, I'm going to go ahead and click, with this last section, which might seem counterintuitive to begin with again. But we kind of wanted you to have the chance to experience this the same way that the coalition did, which is we didn't begin with the conclusions. We began with stories. And so what we'd like to be able to do is put you into little tiny groups of like 2s and 3s and have you focus on a particular stakeholder and to really look closely at those profiles. You can go ahead to the next slide, actually. So look at those profiles, take about 10 minutes, and see the themes that are expressed for that individual user and talk to us about what sticks with you and what themes you notice. Like if you're in the group that's looking at student profiles, for example, what do you notice about students when you look across those profiles? What sticks with you as you empathize yourselves with those groups of users? I do just want to clarify that these user profiles are not, it's not as though we interviewed a single student and then made a user profile for that person. What we did was a lot of interviews with a lot of students. We looked for patterns, and the way the profiles are built is that we pulled quotes from users that seem to relate to one another, and then tried to describe what are the insights that we can gather from this user, what are the real needs of this user. So these user profiles are a kind of composite person, which is, I think if you ask coalition members, I think they would tell you it was very challenging work, actually, to create profiles like this. But it is a kind of thing you can do when you really do want to listen to the stories of individuals and you want to be able to make sense at a scale like a state, is to try and pull some of these things together into some coherent stories. So these profiles are little bits of coherent stories. So Yeah, I was gonna say, do you have any questions before we hop into our task?
Not a question, just a bit more information for the board. When we first met together electronically, you established for me a set of goals for this first year. One was engaging in this process, but I just wanted to point out that it also included conducting a profile of graduate effort across the state. And so you don't see that here. There's a reason for that, and that is because that as we studied the sort of current state at the beginning of this work, we uncovered that the co-ops and the department had already done a profile of graduate effort in 2018 and 2019. So we felt it would have been redundant for us to re-engage that again. So it was really quality work. It's a good piece of evidence that can contribute to this, but just an explanation as to what happened with that.
Any questions before we engage? I'm gonna put you into little groups, just based on where you're seated, to make it as easy as possible. And again, the goal is take 10 minutes and look at the user profiles for the group that you're assigned, and then share out what strikes you. Okay. So could you first three here, down to you, Claire, could you all engage with the student profiles? Everyone else in the room is like, oh. Those are the best.
So that starts on page 7.
Thanks, Lou.
In yellow.
You can keep doing that as I go, Lou. Let's have this be a team effort. Okay, and then Jason and you two, how about you look at family profiles? Okay.
Green, page.
There are a lot of family profiles, I'm just going to say, so I'll be ready for that. And then I think, Lou, down to Joanne, if you all would look at the community member profiles.
Blue.
Randy, you want to go in there too? Okay, sure. Community profile. And then we have school leader and district leaders. So if you guys be school leaders, and you all be district leaders, does that work? Okay, so we'll take 10 minutes. We might meander around a little and eavesdrop on you, but since you all are being publicly broadcast, I don't feel like that's inappropriate. So don't think that you need to engage with us or interrupt your discussions. We just want to hear what you're up to. Okay, so 10 minutes.
Did we miss teacher?
No. Oh, no.
Right, but I don't.
Family. How about you should be teacher then? And then you be school leader and district leader.
We're community.
Every teacher can take one.
Of course they
Well, all right. I'm a teacher. All right, so Joanne and Randy will do teachers.
So, but maybe on the blues.
District leader.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, so 10 minutes to review, read the themes and a few profiles and a compilation. What stuff for you and empathize with this group of users. Right, the teacher wants. I think they end up the teacher and then the same thing with instruction. Their teacher. You all find the teacher profile? Right.
Sorry, I could have offered there, guys, but I had to find the right.
Yeah, so technically,
Okay.
I mean, I would have diverse.
So they've taken these kind of laws and vintage names, trust building tears. And then they wrote it.
So ours are district and school leaders reading their perspective of insight. And then what's stuck out in our mind.
Usually I feel like I'm meeting a celebrity, so listening to her.
Listening to her, I was like, I know you listening to her here. Thank you. Good to meet you. Thank you.
If they're engaged, then you need them.
What they can do is backwards. They can shoot.
You're not going.
Being an Olympic diver, I don't think that's the diver standard. I know there's some right.
But I also like to think about, you know, and then this conversation is trust came up and realize that teacher has something like that to the school district, at least at the superintendent.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This is school-based.
I agree. I don't know that I did this.
Okay.
So like, yeah.
These are good ones. These are from the interviews.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. She was, you know, Stacy Peters and all that.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, really?
The hair is real.
That made me think of Stacy.
Oh, is that right?
All right, now we've got Edna,
This is the time.
That's great.
You tell my mom. She's not the biggest fan. My wife likes it.
There you go. She's the only one you really got to keep happy. Happy wife.
Happy wife.
It's just page 13. Yeah, well, I can tell you about my team. It's accuracy, Alan, and successful Donna. They're very similar. And I was just actually, Donnie, the quotes are real quotes.
Iowa. I grew up in Iowa. I had this journal when I was there this summer.
Alan basically doesn't feel like he's getting any relevant information about it.
You're proud of.
State's assessment system. And his child is included immediately. So that's sort of the story that is. And then similarly, distrustful product. This.
Is that enough?
I think it's okay. Take that up to you.
Right there.
That is sort of the fire things that he's not good at, doesn't like. And Martha is really relevant to what she sees in the future. So she doesn't trust the system
Those are so cool.
Actually,
Yeah. It's frustrating when some of your
I knew exactly where this
And the best part is when everybody knows and on the radar. Right? Like, everybody looks at it and they're like, oh, I know that person.
So here's my question. We know what they need, and we know, so we know that we've got the insight into it. And how do we meet those? I mean, what, then this leader, where do they get those resources?
Well, that would be a great
share with
our intention. Is that the local laboratories start with and
How about we take just a couple more minutes? Yeah. No, there's a lot here.
There's also just children wants needs to understand.
Complaints and concerns from that they've had for years, survey, and that's what they have, and the employers do that. A lot of people. But I love is they do never approve the parts of it, even if we put in system. That's how, that's how response rate is. And what they want to know is what about. So we're gonna. No, but I need to figure it out. That's how much. So we need some really good things out there on what.
I think people.
This is like a pretty. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, but we need to talk more. Clean the around.
We have found.
My kid is 6 years old now, and they know that that's what she studies. Yeah, they get from the same thing. And they live in a society that's important.
And 2 weeks and 3 weeks. But I just felt like I knew this. I'm sorry. I mean, yeah, and she said, and I said, I don't know what to say, just great or Houston, and at least give them days and let them fit it in on them. And I said, because you would agree on all that. And he asked,
I've been out.
When they walked into the right, sorry. I'm gonna be in a meeting time. Thank you.
I don't expect
Bring us back together. You'll thank me when you get lunch later.
The most desired pole position spot.
Yeah, right before
Everyone.
lunch. All right, let's come back into a discussion, and just would love to hear out from each of the groups. Again, sort of what struck you, what stuck with you, and I'd like to begin with student group. It was sort of tradition in the work of the coalition that when in doubt, start with students. That was how we went about things. So let's just do that again here today.
Well, I think one thing we were struck by was the power of student choice and voice, and how so many times many of the issues could be resolved if students were listened to more and had the opportunity to make those choices and to learn how to interact with one another and, reach those agreements and deal with the diversity in their own classrooms through some of the choices they make.
I think I keep coming back to is the engagement, interest, real world application that students are yearning for. And it makes me go back to, I think we mentioned earlier about the original purpose behind accountability. And we have just kind of adulted the life out of it, right? I mean, we really have. And the data and all this stuff, that's not for students, that's for us, right? But we're still, we're trying to put a round peg in a square hole because we're still operating under an assessment system that's standardized, all the while trying to do learning in a personalized way. You cannot measure the growth and the effectiveness of individualized learning with a standardized assessment system. And I just keep going back to, I get that it has a purpose, and I get that it has a place. I just think that, again, we've adulted the life out of it, and we've put ourselves in a position where we're doing things for us rather than for the kids. And they see that, and they feel it.
We were talking about the fear, it kind of goes back to what we were talking earlier, the status quo mindset. It's the way we've always done it, and there's just this fear of, if we listen to other voices and we listen to other stakeholders, then we're going to have to change the way we've always done things. And there's a fear of the unknown, and they think this is working, and on the paper it may be working. And there's a lot of also policies and implementations in our classrooms so that we can just check it off and we can make it look to the public and we say, hey, this is great, look what we're doing, we have a student voice team. Okay, but are you really having conversations around what are the students saying, and has it made change, and is there positive stuff coming out of having that student voice team rather than just saying, hey, we have one, because then it just falls apart. Because you're not making it the engagement of that and then looking at the positive outcomes and changing things to meet those needs of those students. So we have to kind of break those barriers and those fears down and be ready to do the hard work to make the changes necessary.
What about the group of y'all that looked at the family profiles?
One thing that stood out to me in all of these stories was just the importance of family feedback, the importance in families having a voice in their children's education. And I think when they do get involved and are welcome to be involved, it kind of helps complete that circle when there be feedback between families and teachers about the welfare of their child.
And kind of piggybacking on that, communication was kind of a theme in the ones that I read. And something that stood out to me was families not feeling known. I don't know, that was a really powerful statement to me. And I think we forget sometimes that we build relationships with students and we know how important that is. But building those relationships with parents is really important also, and other family caregivers. So just helping them feel known, understood, and valued in our communication was really important.
One part of this that was impactful for me is the recognition that the quotes in here are real. They're not something that was contrived or made up. These are things that people
people said and experienced in our schools. And so there's an authenticity to it that is striking. And a common element across the profiles that we looked at is this sort of notion that the machine-likeness of the system that we have and how often it's existing to serve its own needs rather than recognizing the needs of children and families and what their individual needs are. Just building on that comment about those are actual quotes. These descriptors are actually written by the coalition members. They went through the process of synthesizing what they were hearing and trying to draw them into an understandable document. So, these are folks in the Commonwealth who are making statements about reality.
Yeah, and actually the final choice about is this profile right was given to the members of the coalition who are from that stakeholder group, right? So the members of the coalition who are family members had the heaviest hand, right, in creating those profiles, but also validating. So yeah, it's real votes with real decisions by real stakeholders.
And which were arrived at through a consensus-driven process as well. So everybody read them, and everybody agreed to them affirmatively. It wasn't you don't just get to sit back and let the work get done. Everybody leaned in, wrote what you see in front of you, and then voted on it to move it forward for your consideration, for the consideration of the Commonwealth.
So how about the community profiles?
Okay. So, one thing we did notice that there is some, a bit of nostalgia for what was, and also there is the importance of trust with the community comes through in loud and clear. But also, I guess for our work, it's important for the community to know and understand and clearly articulate what they want to see as outcomes, and for us to be able to translate those aspirations into honest, authentic data that lets them know if we're delivering or not, and get confirmation of that from them. And so that certainly takes us into what do we measure, what data do we collect? Will they see the data that we collect as responsive to their definitions of how they vision the aspirations that they are expressing? So you gotta really not just, you gotta pay attention to the rules of evidence, but you also have to pay attention to the heart of the customer so that they can recognize it when they see it. Because if they don't, you might as well not do the work. So I think, getting at a real consensus understanding, explicit articulation of what do you need to see for us to be accountable for getting to that goal. I think that's the question that we need to carry on. And on this issue of trust, I do have to say this. Professionals resort to jargon, and it's a problem. We've all experienced when we've worked with a physician who doesn't see us as a thinking human being and a person who has to process whatever they're saying at 20,000 feet when we have to work at 5 feet, and get it done. So we've experienced that frustration. It is not respectful. So to be impactful, responsive clinician practitioner is the job of the professional. Because whether you know it doesn't do your client or your customer or your patient any good if they can't understand what it means for them. Period, the end. That is important. But the customer, the patient, the student, the parent, the community has to trust our expertise. So I think we've got to get to be a whole lot more transparent about practice so that they know why we are doing some of the things that we're doing. I mean, the outrage that we're seeing now, it's certainly not just our work. The hostile reaction to science among some folks that, it makes us think everybody's hostile to masking. And some folks will never get vaccinated. And that scares me to death for teachers and for students. We've seen other examples of it, but I do believe that we owe ourselves the occasion to think about the fact that we got every third grader on grade level in reading and help people understand what happened to make that so. Because everybody in the community could be proud of that, should be proud of that. That's a big, important milestone in learning. So, I think, I'm proud of practice. Jason and I were at a conference yesterday where that was all they were talking about. It was pedagogy. I felt like, whoa, it was so wonderful that they're doing a convening to talk about their work and share expertise. That was fine for that conference, but each one of those folks needs to know how to help parents understand the miracle that happened when their kid learned and celebrate that with them. So that's my soapbox. I think we have to honor pedagogy as our professional choice, but help parents honor it too. Help them own it.
So that doesn't need much elaboration at all. I'll just add that for me, the takeaways, along with what Sharon was talking about, is this notion that I hear it quite often, that there's this consensus around trying to rebalance knowledge with skill, these transcendent, essential skills like communication and responsibility and self-regulation and creativity. And so hearing that balance came really strongly through the community folks as an expectation for those outcomes, along with trust, along with their communication. And I think what Sharon's getting at really hit me. I'd read this profile before, but it didn't strike me as it did today. When one of the speakers, Clarity Seeking Claire, said she wants to understand why the educators, believe some innovation will work. And so that responsibility to not just say, I'm the professional educator, trust me, we don't want to check our expertise at the door, but we have a responsibility to help folks understand why this innovative practice is in fact good for kids. So I think it heightens our responsibility without calling into question that we are making good scientific professional decisions. So, and sustainability and kind of a lamentation about the lack of sustainability kind of threaded through it too.
Some of y'all who looked at the teacher profiles.
Well, when we looked at the teachers, we found that the main themes for teachers were collaborating, building community, and growing. And it was just obvious from these quotes that teachers understand what their students need. Yet, they are given a test that they have to teach to, and they feel like they've been thrown into competition with each other. And the teachers are willing to meet the needs of these students. They want the resources to do that, but they feel like they're left on their own for that. And assuming that the teachers will teach better, the students will learn more because they're in competition with another school, another classroom, is not being effective. And the teachers need to be supported in meeting the needs of those students without worrying about those test scores. So I think that's what struck me the most.
Ditto.
Well, I like what Randy said when we were talking. He said, it used to be that teachers just said, I just want to close my door and teach. And we can't close those doors anymore. We need to open them and get everyone involved.
Well, we were taught that. Go
Yes.
to your room, close the door, and do the best you can for as many students as you can, because the presumption was you couldn't, the job was virtually impossible to vision all students succeeding. I mean, that's a mindset that.
It is if you're alone. It is almost impossible if you do it alone. You know, and it really takes.
Closed.
That's
It
right.
is impossible.
That's right.
Exactly.
We're closed.
And the other thing that, the one, was glaring is that in the community building, they're between the teachers and the parents, that, you know, the achievement gap is created by parents who are involved and parents who are not. So there's still that fundamental belief out there that, the opportunity gap is based not necessarily on me, but based on these opportunities. So how, then teachers want those resources to overcome those opportunities, but they're not being provided at the same time.
How about the school leader profiles?
On the radar, Ray, in relationship. I am a little bit overwhelmed and intrigued by how closely all of these are interwoven. It's absolutely, you know, we all have the same goal. We want to see our students succeed. And if all of this is just kind of rising to the top, it's interesting to see. We have the school leadership stakeholders, and they're hungry for relationships. We need to know our kids, and we need to know that they're more than a number on a standardized test. We need to stop trying to put that square peg in the round hole or whatever. We need to get to know our community. We need to get to know our parents and build that joint effort to build success in our students. And I was taken back thinking about, for centuries, our schools were the key center focal point for our communities. That's where you would go for things way beyond school. And parents and families, community members interacted. And we have become islands now. And it's time to pull back together, I think. That's my soapbox.
Yeah, I agree with that. Firstly, my perception of a school leader, just from a student perspective, is kind of just, you know, these people in the school walking around in the hallways with their loud shoes.
I hear the click, click.
The walkie-talkies, you know, all of it. Yeah, so honestly, that's what I think. But you know, they go and do, you know, their work, and you know, there isn't really any student interaction. And to see this, and to see the need for school leaders and how they want to go out into the communities and learn more about their surroundings and the people they serve beyond the walls of the school is so great. And so I was also astonished from that perspective of these people who, you know, really care about, you know, the ins and outs of their school system, yet wanting to seek that additional perspective as well. So it was great.
District leaders.
District leaders, I guess one of the things that jumped out to me is that is the expectation that they want the school to draw the community into the arena. They expect the school to be an integral part and integrating all of the community. So that jumped out at me. And then one of the things that really jumped out at me was that the importance of soft skills and hard skills. In fact, I think many times in our education society today, we don't value that as much as we need to. Hard skills will get you hired, soft skills will, or the lack of soft skills will get you fired. So those are some of the things, and as district leaders, we want to be open and inviting the community into our buildings, our school building. There's nothing more critical than having the community have open access to what we're doing in our buildings, in our teachings, and you can't be afraid to open the door and allow the community to come in, because that means that there's a lack of trust. They think you're hiding something. So, as a district leader, those are some things folks know.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the other thing that kept sticking out to me as a former building leader and thinking about what the district leader is saying is they want a system that honors the work that's going on, that's relevant. Because as administrators in schools or districts, you're beat up by the media. It doesn't matter if you've made great gains with different populations. If you have one deficit, that's what's focused on. And after multiple years of a deficit model instead of growth, when you're working on that continuous improvement and growth of students, it is very disheartening, and it's tough on the culture of your school. And the other piece I think that sticks out to me is the cry for help on how do you partner effectively with community. Open houses and feeding families is not enough. It's not really meeting the need, and it's not culturally sensitive, honestly, to a lot of the students. And I think when I keep reading the quote is we want to do it. And when you read about the employers saying we need the schools and the districts to be the hub of the community, how have we equipped our school leaders to take on that role effectively and in a relevant way? If we've been in education our whole careers as teachers and leaders, it is really hard to understand the role of industry or different sectors of having an expertise of sharing that language. And so I see a want for it and a desire for a relevant accountability system to say, if you all say this is what's important, then let's measure what's important. Long-term, hard skills and soft skills, we've talked about it constantly, and there's an expectation for schools to deliver, but I don't know that we've ever equipped and built the capacity of the folks to really know what that means and what does that look like. And I'm sure there are pockets of excellence in the state. I know there are communities that we have visited in the past that are really impressive of what they're doing, but those are so isolated. And I think some common understandings and expectation and capacity building opportunities would be powerful. Just bringing people to the table is one thing, but having that meaningful conversation with clear outcomes and actionable items for students is what everybody wants. And it's just how do you get there? But that's what I keep reading. It's like, give us a system that supports what you want us to do and then help us to get there. So, I think so, yeah. So let's go ahead to the next slide. Oh, we don't even have our slides, sorry. Looking. So we're going to share with you some of the themes that were identified as Commonwealth-wide themes, right? And you already know a lot of them because you articulated them yourselves today. But listening across these different stakeholders, there are.
We don't have bricks, though.
Yeah, we don't excuse. No creative art endeavor. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. These are in the document that you have in the Commonwealth-wide themes. You can look at them there, but I'm going to go ahead and read them out because I think it's good to just hear the full set of these themes. And I do want to mention too, these are there's a subgroup of the coalition that's working on the current state report, and they have validated these themes. Right? So again, it's not as though Donnie and I went to a room and we're like, these are the Commonwealth themes. These are coming again from the coalition. So. Again, I'm just going to read these out, even though that might seem boring, but I think it's just important. Stakeholders believe that everyone is trying. Everyone is working hard. Students are trying, teachers are trying, families and communities are trying. School and district leaders and KDE are all working hard on behalf of Kentucky students. There's a reverence for education and educators in Kentucky. Schools are a hub of community, and they could do more to expand relational trust and public trust more globally. The culture of schooling does not sufficiently welcome, foster, or facilitate the kind of collaboration that might expand trust.
The commitment to efficiency and impartiality and authority get in the way of authentic learner-centered and community-centered collaboration and partnership. Inequities in opportunities and outcomes persist despite the efforts of students, families, educators, system leaders, and communities. It's important to learn more about the root causes of these inequities. The system doesn't really know, see, or value each stakeholder as an individual. This is true, as you all heard, for students, for families. It was as true for them as it was for teachers and leaders. There are similar feelings from communities that the system doesn't adequately see or know or value the aspirations, assets, or challenges of their community. Go ahead to the next slide. While there are significant efforts made to communicate and provide students and their families with data that promotes continued learning, few stakeholders feel that communication and feedback are currently promoting shared understanding and mutual trust and partnership. The current approach to state and federal accountability and assessment sends a message of distrust, breeds competition, and plays a powerful role in making stakeholders feel like numbers or cogs in a machine that is ultimately accountable to state and federal entities. There is a hunger for local accountability and assessment systems that see a more full picture of each student and value the investment of teachers and school leaders and local boards that they make in providing relevant, personal, and joyful learning opportunities to each young person in their community. There is a hunger for schools to help students pursue and feel valued in pursuing a broader range of pathways toward professional, civic, financial, and personal independence. And the hardship of COVID has created a strong appetite among stakeholders to reflect on what we've been doing and imagine how to move forward toward a better future. So we were going to get into pairs and discuss, but I feel like we would all faint of hunger if we did that. But I do want to open it up to say if folks do have any questions or reactions to that, it'd be good to just hear out from you all before we transition to. I'm going to go from here into kind of where is this work headed? And then you'll be done and lunch will be done. So any reactions to what you hear here? I know it's hard to react when I just read a list of things to you real fast in the room. That wasn't the plan, but again, lunch.
I'm eager to hear where this goes.
Maybe we can just do that.
I think that for me, you'll notice this started with some very affirming kinds of statements, those first two. It's not an issue of people not trying. It's not an issue of people resisting. We have hardworking, dedicated individuals across the system who have faith in the system and are supportive of it. It is now a challenge of how we take on some of the things that are in the way of, quote, that more perfect education system that we've been working on for a number of years. So I know looking at all of this, it seems daunting that these are almost insurmountable kinds of challenges in front of us, but they're not. We have an environment, an ethos here in the state that allows for this kind of creativity, innovation. And we have a board. Through your documents, through your perfect, your statements today, Randy, your statements about opportunity. All of those things are shared by the board and the public. It seems to be coming together in terms of a general understanding about where we are and where we need to go, which is a really positive position to be in, even though you have many challenges and complexities in front of you.
When we said this, we are by our nature. We see a challenge and we want to create a system to fix it or a way to fix it. And we do that, and we do it really well. I think one of the things that we fail to address a lot of times is the way that we continue to work towards solutions to create new and better systems and all those types of things. And it piles up and piles up and piles up, and we never stop to think, what is no longer working? What can we remove from this? Because, in this innovation and in this way to move forward, yeah, there's a lot of ways we could do things better. There's a lot of ways that we can do things differently, but we're going to miss this moment if we don't also ask ourselves, what is worth not doing? Or what, what is outdated now? What are we doing just to check the list because it's the status quo, right? So if we have this system in place, I'm sure the intention is pure and good, but it may not be doing what we need it to do, or it may be outdated, or it may be another layer on something that, this is actually more important, but I still got X, Y, and Z that I have to deal with every single day and check those boxes, right? So I think this is just as much about what can we remove and reinvent as it is what can we continue to add onto the plate of everyone, families, kids, teachers, school leaders, right? We got plenty to do. We got plenty of ways to look at it. But what's worth doing away with?
Sure.
Please.
What I see is from our morning activities together is we have these perceptions out there. We got to change. We got to redirect those things. And I tie this back to our morning thing. We're our walls and our bridges. And when you look at this, where our current state is, our future state. So we kind of did the same activity this morning. And now here's this, and then here's the learning agenda. And then I'll go back to a wise commissioner once told us that here's the things that we need to do, then the rest is noise. So we've got to decide here as a board and the others, what is noise and what do we do? And let's keep on the things we need to do and forget the noise. And there's a lot of noise out there that's trying to distract our agenda right now. And we have to stay focused on our kids, as we've talked about, and focus on creating and our craft of our teachers. Let's perfect our craft of the teachers, and not only our teachers, but our staff. Sometimes we talk about teachers, we're forgetting that it's all encompassing of our staff. And where do we build that positive culture? And what do we do to keep that culture going? We can talk about strategy all we want, but let's build that culture. And just like Dr. Tucker Woods gave us a great outline on diversity, we've got to stay old and true to that mission and forget the noise. That's what I take away from it.
I'm thrilled. I'm exhilarated by the confluence of, just as Randy was talking about, the things that we discussed this morning, the way that the report is coming in, starting with keep doing, start doing, and stop doing. Nobody ever gave me a stop to-do list.
Right.
So really thinking about the potential power of this place in time for us to kind of seize this work, I think is exactly why we wanted to be on this Board of Education. So I love seeing that coming to fruition. The synthesis of it, when I was able to look at the report drafts a couple weeks ago, it's really powerful. When you're in the middle of the work, it feels a little slow, and then it feels like a lot, and then momentum kind of picks up, and then when it all comes together, it's like, oh yeah, that's what I heard too. So really, I'm proud of the process. Thank you for the process, and then really challenged by the important work this board has ahead of us to meet this challenge.
Yeah, I will say the feeling in the coalition, or at least my observation of the feeling in the coalition, is one of hope and joyfulness, actually. Like, there's a lot of excitement and energy from the coalition members about uncovering some of these things, finding commonalities, finding that community and business people want to be in partnership, and so do district leaders. And that it's not that anyone doesn't want to do it, it's just they need some help finding out the way to do it well, right? That's a hopeful discovery, to find that actually aspirations are so well aligned, and that what we see as problems and barriers is also very similar. That puts us in a great position to do good things.
At the heart of this teacher, when I hear, my colleague always says, joyful learning is a worthy pursuit, and that tugs powerfully at my heartstrings.
I like the third block out. When I was reading the report, I wasn't by itself without the explanation and the activity today. It wasn't getting to me, but the light bulb went off, as we're going through the activity. I just want to say I really love the third column, which is learning agenda, because that's what we need to be focused on. Whoever came up with that part that's the work that I see from this report. And in the future, I could go back and look at the learning agenda and are we accomplishing these things? And then we are busting down these walls.
Yeah.
If we're not doing learning agenda, then it's just an organization again, and we're gonna be on that other side of the wall and not learning how to change.
So let's go ahead and move to what is the learning agenda? What are we talking about here? You were pointing to the third column. Let's get there. So we've provided just a couple of examples because, again, this is still the current work of the coalition. They are doing this work right now, looking at current state, future state, and identifying what are the key things we need to learn together to move in the direction of the future state. So we wanted to give a couple of examples. So this is an example of a Commonwealth-wide theme, one of the ones that was shared earlier, the system not really knowing, seeing, or valuing each stakeholder as an individual. The implications in terms of future state, what do people want to see instead, right? They want to have students, families, teachers, and local education leaders feel seen, known, and welcomed at school, not just in their role, not just like, I'm glad to see you, teacher, but also as a whole person, as whole individuals, and also members of their broader community. They want communities and students and families and educators within those communities to feel seen and known and valued by you all and other officials in Kentucky. Right? Your accountability system communicates a certain set of things. They would like to be seen in a different way. So that leads us to a learning agenda. We have some big questions. So in this case, the big question is, what is causing stakeholders to feel this way? What's causing them to feel like numbers or gears or cogs in this machinery? Sub-questions. What common practices, procedures, or beliefs and assumptions are causing stakeholders to feel unseen, unknown, or undervalued? What policies, local, state, or federal, relate to or foster those first things, those practices, those procedures, or those assumptions? And what role does accountability and assessment play, or what role could it play in addressing these issues? This next example is the stakeholder-specific theme. So this is another theme from students. Students need support that focus on their holistic well-being because of the anxiety and pressure associated with being a young person. Future state. Students can voice when they're feeling pressure or when things seem like they aren't working. When students voice needs, educators respond in ways that provide support, continue to express belief in the capability and potential of the young person, and reinforce or deepen the human connection between educator and student. Educators have access to a range of strategies, resources, partners, and methods to meet students' social and emotional needs. So if that's our future state, what do we need to learn? Big question is, again, what are the sources of stress and pressure for young people? What's helpful for young people as it relates to stress and pressure? Some questions. What common practices, procedures, beliefs, assumptions, etc. are contributing to that? And again, similar pattern. What policies do we have that are fostering those things happening? And what questions do we have about assessment and accountability and how they might play a different role? So we want to share these two examples because this is what the coalition is producing. But then also, if you go ahead to the next slide, this is what the L3 communities are going to be engaging with. So for this question, about students' social and emotional well-being, an L3 community might look at that and decide that they want to deepen or sharpen some current piece of work. So for example, some of you may know that Shelby County has a really great graduate profile, and that really great graduate profile has connected to it a really strong capstone performance assessment for graduates in that community. They might go, we love our profile. What more could we do to ensure that the process of a student working on a capstone would be something that doesn't create unhelpful pressure and stress, but really has them feel supported, and maybe addresses another concern they have around identity and feeling known, right? How might we sharpen a thing we already have instead of adding on, Frankenstein style? How might we sharpen something to respond to this, and in learning about that, what might we have to offer to the Commonwealth about
how our students more authentically engage with the community around that capstone.
Exactly, right? So they can respond to these different questions, these different components of the learning agenda to revisit something. Other communities may look at something like this and realize that it offers new focus for new work, hopefully not adding on in all infinity. But because they realize there's actually something they haven't been addressing, right? A new body of work around SEL might emerge, for example, in trying to respond to this part of the learning agenda if the community hasn't already got some start in that direction. You'll go ahead. And then there's one other way that this local work might diverge. It's important for you to be aware of, which is that sometimes we imagine that as they do this inquiry, they're going to find that actually the constraints are ones that they themselves control. Shelby County controls its graduate profile and its capstone. There's probably not a whole lot they need from you to change parameters of that. They have the authority to do that all by themselves. When that's the case, the role of the department, which Kentucky has a long history of actually, is to support capacity building, which many of you have talked about today, right? That when somebody locally has the authority, but what they need is capacity, that's something the department can really respond to. There are a number of people who need the same capacity. You can help that, not only because you can have sort of efficient technical assistance, but them being connected to one another is a way of doing it well, and you can facilitate that. On the other hand, there may also be things where they bump up against something where they don't have the authority themselves to make the change that's required, right? There may be something about your state's approach to accountability. There may be something about the way that reporting is done to the department. There may be, procedural things where actually other people hold the authority. In which case, what these communities are going to expect is the same thing that students are asking for here, which is that when they raise their concerns to you all consider them and find a way to respond. Understanding their boundaries to your authority too, but also understanding that within those boundaries there are things that can be done, and also you have some ability to push on some of those boundaries with other people who hold some of those authorities. So this local work could lead to things that they can do all by themselves. It may lead to things where they're going to need your help.
And so for the language from this morning, this is the bridge side of the wall that we at the policy level we can serve.
Yeah. So last slide. We're so close to lunch. I know you can feel it. I can too. Just a reminder of timeline and process here a little bit, right? So the L3 has kind of two different membership groups. One group starting in the fall. Their inquiries are going to begin, again in sort of September, October. The coalition is going to have little dark blue bubbles down here. They'll have a chance to stay engaged and keep hearing some learning from that engagement, but so will you and so will the department. You'll each have multiple points of contact and hearing from the inquiries from those groups. In the spring, that expands to a larger number of districts who are participating. And actually, in a good news story, during the coalition, 2 more districts joined. Yeah, who weren't part of the L3 at all, by being part of the coalition, decided they really wanted to be. So, again, I think back to that first Commonwealth theme, as a visitor to Kentucky, I will say it's encouraging how very apparent it is that educators have a practice, like they have sort of strong muscles about being in collaboration with one another and learning together. And that's so important in the state context because that's actually how good work scales, right? The work of these local communities, these will be, a handful of districts doing this work, but because they're in relationship with one another, and because your department continues to do such a good job of facilitating them being in relationship with one another, that's how good ideas spread. We used to think good ideas spread through replication, where a good idea would happen and your department would issue directions to everyone, and then everyone would magically fit. That's not actually how it happens. It happens through relationship, and the power and depth of relationships across this state are really a powerful asset. So
if an open door is good for accelerating classroom practice,
right,
then having open doors in district offices and whole schools and across the system is a recipe for system-wide.
Mm-hmm. So that's where it's headed.
Excellent. All right, great morning. Thank you for everything, CIE and beyond. We've invited them to join us for lunch, but first let me march you through some orders. We're going to do our group photo outside. Tony's going to corral us to get that done here in just a second. Lunch will be on the 5th floor. Just the regular elevators out here will be fine. And photo, eat lunch, and if we need a little bit of extra time, let's plan to reconvene no later than 1:10. But we'll see how everybody does. Get some steps in, hydrate. great to take care of you. So thank you very much. At this time, we will recess for lunch.